question I hear about The Last Flame time and time again is which heroes do I pick? Why is this game so hard? And what are some beginner tips and tricks? Well, in today's video, I aim to answer some of these questions with a hero tier list. My name's Spec, and this is my first ever tier list video, my first ever non-gameplay video. Now, if you just want to skip the context and get into the tier list definition and the hero tier list itself, I'll post some links pinned down below in the comments section. And if you like the video, consider liking and subscribing. There's plenty more content to come in the future. I love this game. Otherwise, just sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. For those that don't know me, I've been playing this game for just a couple months now, and I've got a couple hundred hours. I like to experiment, try janky builds, and most importantly, try new tactics and record them. I want to have fun videos for you guys to watch. I can win consistently on the hardest difficulty, so Flame Master, Surge with Reborn turned on, and I'm currently going through all the characters on Reborn and winning with them as well. If you want to join that series, come check out my channel and you'll see some of those characters. But this game is so complex. No matter what I rate these characters in the tier list, someone's going to disagree, and I might actually be wrong. I might have not played the character the right way. So if you disagree with something I've said, please leave a comment below so I can learn and other people can learn and agree with you and convince me that I'm wrong. So please post below so we can all learn together. Now, let's crack into the tier list definitions. So we have S through to E. I genuinely believe all characters could fit in B and C. They're really well balanced. If you know how to play any character, you can use them right. You can also use them wrong. But for the sake of this video, I want to split them up to make it more interesting. And what's going to define them are a few criteria. And I'm just going to blurt them out now. So how easy are they to itemize? How do they open up synergies? How well do they go in synergies? Do they play consistently? Do they win, consistently when they're in the team? Or do sometimes they do well, sometimes they do poorly? Sometimes maybe good, sometimes maybe, yeah, you get it. But the most important criteria is how beginner friendly are they? So if you can pick this character and they can carry you hard with a few items or whatever, then they're going to go higher up in the list. And the reason I've done that is because I want the new players to get into the game and simply play better. Because I find a lot of complaints about this game is the game's too hard, and I don't actually agree. It started off a bit rocky, but over time, I can win most games that I play, if not all games that I'm tryharding. The point of the tier list is to help out beginner players, but I definitely think there's something in there for anyone playing. First up, we have the E tier. So E tier has 3 specific criteria. 1, I haven't played them enough. 2, I don't really get them. And 3, which is kind of like 1, I don't find them very fun. So if I don't find them fun, I'm not picking them much. So you can kind of disregard E tier for now until I've learnt them. There aren't too many characters that will fall down here, so you don't need to worry. If I do put someone down here, I would love for you to tell me why you like them or why you think they're busted, so I can learn, use them, and then change my opinion, because I'm pretty open to all heroes, to be honest. I genuinely think all heroes can fit in B and C. Next, we have D tier. These heroes require a lot of items or a lot of synergies to set up. They can absolutely carry you and win the match, but you do require a lot of investment, or you need to understand the complex interactions they have. So it might not just be as straightforward as they do damage. It might be they do damage if they do this and this happens. The more complex they are, the more likely they are to be in D, because they're not beginner friendly. And that makes them not consistent. So they're going to be in D tier. Then we have C. C is where everything should fit. C is well balanced. So if you have 5 Cs in your team, you should be able to win, as long as they're mildly synergistic, because they should all be supporting each other. So you need to have a bit of game knowledge, you need to itemize quite well, but they'll get you through it. They're just a well performer. They do okay. You got a mild smile on your face when you're picking them. Then we've got B. B is pretty straightforward. B is just overperforming Cs. So they're just a little bit more consistent, do a little bit more damage, they're easier to set up. They have more impact when you put them on the field. You plonk them down and they go, oh, okay, this guy's kind of good. As soon as you start telling yourself that, they're probably in B tier, especially as a beginner character player. Then we have A tier. A tier are slam picks. They're just like, they have high damage, they have high utility, they're very consistent, they're easy to kit out, or they have a really good skin. They're essentially beginner winners, and they'll have one of these, I guess, criteria, and that will really set them apart from everyone else. And I haven't said it here, but they also open up synergies really well. So this one character will allow you to do Surge. This one character will completely unlock Burn, Shock, Frost, Attack Damage, Crit, or whatever builds. And then finally, we have S tier. S tier are just must picks. They're multiple criteria from A. So they're very consistent and they're high damage. Or they're very high utility and very high damage. Or they open up a synergy and they do a lot of damage. They're going to have multiple of these criteria. But They come onto the field, they can essentially solo a lot of fights, and you just feel their presence. It's hard to not pick an S tier character as a beginner because they'll carry you through so much. Now, another thing, it's not just multiple criteria from A, it could be all criteria from B. So that they do good damage, they do well in synergies, they're kind of easy to pick up for new players, they're pretty consistent. Essentially, there's not a single weakness about them, and they are just so good and easy to use. And again, this is going to change over time. This is just currently what I'm thinking. And honestly, from this point on in the video, I have no script. This is all going to be off the cuff. You're going to hear my raw thoughts as I develop them. There are 65 characters to get through. And one final mention is that for this tier list, I will be basing them on Reborn, Flame Master, so the maximum base difficulty with Surge turned on. That's the category, but it won't be for Reborn characters. That will be another tier list. So once I've gone through all characters on Reborn, I will make another hero tier list, update this one based on their Reborn versions. Let's crack on in to the tier list. Ka-chow. This is going to be random. I'm not going to go in any single order, but I have decided who I'm starting with. And from this point on in the video, there is no script. This is all off the cuff, coming from my brain cell. I'm going to try to tell you about my pros, cons, weaknesses, strengths, synergies of every single of the 65 characters. But this will be off the cuff, so I might just do a little bit of post-editing or whatever. And I'm going to start off strong. I am going to start off with Alaric. Alaric's passive increases their spell power over time based on your surge level, but loses it all when you cast. And then when he casts, he rains death from above. He shoots a beam, just like Judgment Day, and obliterates the enemy. Alaric has a weakness. That beam splits its damage. So let's say it does 1,000 damage and there's 3 enemies beneath you, it does 333 damage to each of them. Or if there's one unit, it just does the full 1,000. So he does better in single target fights, typically. Not always the case, but typically. We're starting off so strong here. His beam does ridiculous damage without items. Like, no items at all, he can carry you through the first act. He also unlocks Surge. His damage generates energy, which increases your Surge level. So he unlocks Surge, he does so much damage, he doesn't need to be itemized, and you don't need to think. You pick, place, and win with Alaric. As a beginner player, I would highly recommend picking him up. And essentially any spell power weapons or cast speed mana regen weapons or equipment do well on him. He's essentially the definition of an S tier. He isn't the best S tier, in my opinion, but he is absolutely up there. So we're starting off strong with Alaric. Now we have Magmis. Magmis' deal is when he casts, he increases his attack speed, and with that cast, he does an AoE damage that applies 4 burns and increases burn amplification. So essentially he does more damage to burnt characters. So if you focus on mana regen, he's going to attack faster, which makes him a really good candidate for a hybrid character. And I find that's where I go with him. He works really well with a few items that increase damage on debuff, such as this one here. I'll put it up on screen, can't remember. It's the sword that does damage based on debuffs and attack damage and spell power. And I find he's consistently good. Can't really fail with him. You can go attack path, you can go spell power path. His damage is AoE, which means he's good early on. And late game, he's got so much going for him because of that attack speed that he gains from his passive. I like Magmis. I think he's simple to use. He semi-opens up burn with the apply 4 burn. It's not that quick, but it's a lot better than most other characters. And he utilizes that burn through burn amplification. There's really not much wrong with him. He's a very strong character. Honestly, it's a low A tier or a high B tier for me. I think it's going to go high B for now, purely for the fact that you do have to itemize him correctly to really utilize him, although it's just not that difficult. Next up, we have Azura, one of my favorite characters. So Azura's deal is that they increase their spell power based on max HP. When they cast, they increase their max HP based on shocks. So they self-perpetuate as long as the enemy is shocked. And what you really want to do on Azura is either keep them in the back line and give them pure mana regen, so they increase their max HP as much as they can through casting, or you can have them as off tank and do a combination of max HP and cast speed. And then that way they're kind of growing themselves over time, but they have the initial, max HP to not get taken out with that armor. I love Azura. Azura can scale their health indefinitely because of that shock. So if you have like the shock helmet on your tank and they're generating a lot of shock on the enemy, then Azura's damage can scale to the absolute moon. In fact, I think Azura is one of my highest damage dealers if I had to pick on average out of any single character, but they have to play right. And the thing is, they utilize shock, they generate no shock. So you need to get the right items on them. You also need to generate shock. You have to have the party there. But once you have that all that going, they can just destroy their enemies. I think for those reasons, I would tend to shy away from putting them in A or S. They're either a low B or low C. But having said that, they're genuinely one of my favorite characters. I think just because of how well balanced they are, they can be bad, they can be good. I'm going to slam them in C. All right, let's do Rinji. Controversial little Rinji. So Rinji's deal is that when they attack, their passive means that their attacks deal additional ethereal damage based on the number of debuffs on enemies. So burns, shocks, frosts, and bleeds. And then when they cast, they increase the amount of debuffs on enemies by 4. So if you have 1 of each on the enemy, then you'll then have 5 after 1 single cast of each individual debuff. When I play Rinji, I ignore his cast because you don't want to focus on mana regen. You just want to focus on attack speed and sometimes crit chance so they can apply more debuffs. If you focus on attack speed and your whole team is supporting him with debuffs, or maybe your Origin or your relics or whatever, he can do a lot of damage. Debuff Mastery is a very powerful ability, especially because it has innate ethereal amplification involved in it. So I like Rinji for those reasons. Early on, I loved him, and over time, I've liked him less and less because I feel he works best in an ethereal build, which isn't really the default for a lot of characters. You kind of have to work towards that rather than start with it. He also relies on debuffs because of the debuff mastery. He's really just debuffs and ethereal, making him a little bit simple in that regard. But I think he needs so much setup around him to make him powerful, it brings him down. It really weighs him down here. I think his ceiling is really high. I think his floor is really low. And that to me is a good character design. So I'm going to throw him in C. Next up, Dagon. Dagon, honestly, is close to being an E. That's not because I haven't played him, and that's not because I don't find him fun. It's because I just haven't quite mastered how to kit him out. He wants everything. They want everything, sorry. They want attack damage for their crystal summons. They want spell power for their crystal summons. They want health for themselves. They want mana regen. They want every single stat bar crit, I think, from memory, and maybe defense is kind of wasted. But I have made them work. And well, actually, we're not talking about Reborn, but I love their Reborn. I have made them work. So if you ramp up that attack damage, spell power, and mana regen, then they can do a lot of healing and a lot of damage. They work well in summon builds. They summon these crystal elementals, which increase the number of summons on the field. So they kind of semi-unlock summons. They have some good healing, good damage if you kit them out right. I think they're a really good character, and I think because they have all that going for them, and they unlock summon, they're in low B tier. I like Dagon. Next up, we have, now I can never remember if that's Gerald or Naka. Yeah, there's Gerald, and we'll do him afterwards. Let's just go one after the other. So this is Naka. Naka is a tank who increases their attack speed based on every time they get shield. That's their passive. And then their cast is, what is it from memory? They get shield based on max HP and they apply bleeds. So he's actually a really good tank, and all you need to do on him is focus on max HP. So the few items that go crazy with him. First up is just the body armor that increases max HP. That's what you should really be focusing on him. Next up is the Giant's Glove. It's every 2 attacks you do a % damage of your health, but as ethereal damage on the enemy. Every time I run that build, he's my biggest damage dealer, but also my tank. It just seems a bit unfair when you have those things balanced. And then he applies bleed, so he works well on bleed runs. So he applies enough bleed to have an impact. His tanking's good, but can be done wrong. So for example, if he doesn't have enough defense, he can just be squished away, or enough support via healing. Or if he doesn't get enough shield to get his attack speed up. So there's quite a lot going on there, but I don't think he's that difficult. Just put max HP on him and he's pretty good. He doesn't have taunt though, and tanks without taunt do automatically get bumped down 1 grade for me, because I want my tank to be absorbing all those enemies. There are a few cases where I don't think that's required, but Naka's close to being that case. But yeah. Anyway, I think Naka's got a lot going for them. I think they're simple to build. I think they attack quickly, which is cool for items that have an on-attack effect. And they don't necessarily need to be in a bleed build. They're just kind of like a good tank, really. I think they're high C or low B. I would probably prefer Naka over Dagon as a pick, just going based on vibe alone. So I'm probably going to put Naka in B tier. Next, we have Gerald. So I thought about him last night, literally while I was lying in bed, phrasing. He completely unlocks crit synergies. So he does his cast, gives the whole team crit. he is insane in crit builds, because then from that point onwards, every single other character has a few free item slots. They don't need the crit increasing items. They can focus on crit damage, mana regen, attack damage. He's not just a support in crit, but he's a support in all the items you can give everyone else. It's very powerful. At first I put him down like, wow, this guy is so strong, giving everyone 40% crit or 50% crit based on how much spell power you give him. And it's not hard to get 100% uptime for that. You give him a bit of mana regen and boom, everyone's got permanent crit buff. So I love Gerald. The thing about Gerald is that outside of that, I typically make him a utility and he has a low impact. He can't get enough damage because you're focusing on that casting and the aura. You're kind of focusing on a lot of things with him. So that does weigh him down a little bit. But then the fact that that aura completely unlocks your entire team so well in crit, I'm actually going to throw him in A. So I'm tempted to bring him down to B purely because he only unlocks crit teams. So the thing is, I'm not picking him unless I've got crit characters. Why would you want to give your team crit if you don't have a crit team? So it's not really, it's a moot point to say, oh, but what if you're not doing crit? Because, well, why are you picking him? But if you have a few crit characters and you pick him up, you're laughing because now your team's just unlocked and it's stepped up in power so significantly. So he's going to break the rules a little bit and he's going to go in A. Next, we have Naomi. Now, I'm hoping that's her name, right? It's Naomi? Nyria. Good. I'm glad I checked. So Nyria's deal is when she casts, she activates when you surge, and she has a passive that when you surge, you get defense and max HP. I really like Nyria. She doesn't have taunt, which is a negative, but she generates defense and health over time. So as long as you can keep her alive initially and get a few casts off, she becomes quite a beefcake. So what is this? Oh, okay. So Nyria is a really good tank as long as you keep them alive at the start, so she just needs that initial support to keep her alive, and she doesn't have taunt. One item I find that works really, really well with her is that shield that increases max HP every time you win, like that permanently increases max HP every time you win a match, because what that item does is strip away all your defense at the start of the match and give you max HP. Which is okay for Nyria because she generates defense after the start of the match, where every time she casts or every time you surge. So with that item, pairs so well with her, and then you can just focus on items that scale with max HP. So I really like Nyria. I think because she is so squishy at the start without support, and she's better in surge builds, so she does depend on surge, and she doesn't help generate surge. She's probably going to be in C. I think she's just a really well-balanced character. I'm tempted to put her at low B, to be honest, because I think she performs quite well. I'll put her at the top of C. She can be like number 1 C. Then let's go Elriel. First healer, I believe. So Elriel's deal is that when they crit, they increase the whole team's attack speed. Really good. And their base crit is like 30% or something ridiculous. They are a caster that does an AoE attack damage to the enemies, and then based on that damage, it heals your team. Now, I struggle with Elriel. I struggle to make Elriel work in my builds because you want Elriel to have more crit chance. You want her to have more attack speed so that she crits more, so she gets her passive off more frequently. You also want her to cast more so that she does damage and have more spell power to do more damage. Elriel wants every single offensive stat. But also, and primarily, the heal is garbage. Her attack is focused on where the enemies are, and you heal within that circle. So she's not focusing her heal on who needs to be healed. She's just healing who happens to be around the enemies at the time. So in a melee build where all your characters are up in the thick of it, she's better. But even then, sometimes you just don't position well that the heal doesn't get who you need it to get. So I think she's quite needy and she can be played wrong so easily. She also needs some good item support and she doesn't really unlock many synergies. I think for that reason, she's actually D tier. I don't enjoy playing her for those reasons. I might be misplaying her. Let me know in the comments what you think and if you think I've got that wrong. And then we'll go to Giachi. Giachi's deal is that their passive is every time they regenerate mana, they get more shield received and their health is lost before their shield, which is pretty cool. Good passive on him especially. And then their spell is a buff which increases the defense based on the shield you have, and then based on how much damage you reduce from that defense, does ethereal damage back to the enemies. He also doesn't have taunt. I found Giachi to be quite difficult to play. So you want him to have a high mana regen rate, so he's casting more frequently. You want him to have as much shield as possible from other sources, not just himself. And even then, he doesn't have taunt to really get aggro to attack enemies. If he had taunt, his level would be much higher. And I don't personally have a good time with him. I find he requires too much setup, and in the harder difficulties, he just doesn't perform very well. I've invested so much in Giachi, and he's never really carried a run for me. He has actually once, that's a lie. He has carried one run with me before, but that's when the stars aligned and I got like Naomi and I got some cool relics and stuff. But it required so much setup. For that reason, I don't pick him very often. And I would put him D, but I actually think I don't choose him enough to actually even define him in D. So I'm going to put him in E. And that's kind of like, that's a get out of jail free card really, because I think he should be in D, but I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt that I'm just maybe playing him wrong and slam him in the E tier. Awesome. On to our next character. Who are we going to do? Let's go Alec. So Alec's deal is that they cast based on attack speed. The more attacks he gets out, the more chance he has to generate max mana, which is the mana tomb ability that I'll show on screen now. And then when he does cast, he applies a blood tornado around all your heroes, and then that damages the enemy and applies bleed to them. So really important here is that you've got a melee build such that those tornadoes are around units that are around enemies. So you can see in the animation, if you go, I just realized you can't see in the animation. So you can see in this animation, the whirlwinds are going around your heroes, which then apply the bleed. So if your heroes aren't in the thick of it, you're not applying much damage with him. So he's really dependent on having a melee build. The cool thing about Alec is you don't need to worry about mana regen. I don't know why he comes with base 3 mana regen, because all you want to do is give him attack speed and a bit of max mana. Because max mana essentially does nothing for him, because he's casting based on the attacks that he does. So I have had a lot of luck with Alec, but I've also struggled with him at times. He's so dependent on having a lot of items. He's item thirsty. If you can get him a 4th item slot through Demigod passive or through the Redo pack, he can be quite good. But if he doesn't, I find he really struggles, even with the best items. I like him though. I think he's fun. It's nice to have a caster that you don't really care about their mana regen. It's any character that eliminates a stat is always fun to do. He also applies bleed, so he works well on the bleed teams, but I think that's kind of neither here nor there really. Honestly, I think he's low C. I've done poorly with Alec more than I've done well. The only times I've done well with Alec is when I've gone into run and gone, I am choosing Alec and he's the guy that I'm going to make my primary damage dealer, so I put all my mental energy into him. Okay, so next up, let's do Leuko. Leuko's deal is he applies Frost with his cast, and if that cast Omni-crits, so critical strikes the enemy, which it can because it has Omni-crit, it gives your whole team attack damage. His passive is cool because it gives him Omni-crit by default, so you don't need to worry about getting Omni-crit another way. He has a pretty decent high base crit chance. He kind of does a lot, but in my opinion, he doesn't do a lot well. So he doesn't apply Frost the best compared to other characters. Omni-crit passive is really cool, but you do need to invest crit chance to him. And if you want him to damage, you want him to have attack damage or spell power. And if you want spell power, you also want mana regen. And if you're doing that, you also want crit chance because you want him to crit with the Omni-crit to give your team attack damage. So he is very demanding. He's never been a carry for me. His floor isn't that low because he does have a cool base high crit chance and he does have Omni-crit. Please, I think I've got Leuko wrong and I don't know how. But for the time being, Leuko's in D tier for me. So next up, let's do Savos. Savos' deal is that they increase the team's crit chance based on the number of summons in the field. So boom, really good summon synergy, especially because he summons multiple robots, what are they called? Buff bots to the field. So he's self-synergistic, and that crit chance of the team is really powerful. So he works extremely well in any melee summon build. Next up, he has his cast. So every time he casts, he puts 2 buff bots out that give a buff to the entire team based on his stats. So if you go crazy with attack damage, then he's going to put out 2 buff bots that give the whole team attack damage. Similarly, he can increase attack speed or he can increase spell power. Typically, I just do attack damage or spell power because they're easier to scale. So what I like to do with him is 2 items dedicated to the thing that he wants to give out, whether it's attack damage or it's spell power. And then one of the slots is reserved for mana regen, because what you can do is you can actually put out multiple rounds of buff bots, especially if you're healing them because their health goes down over time. So if you manage to be able to get multiple rounds of buff bots out, you're giving your team astronomical amounts of buffs. And that's to 4 other characters, sometimes 5, and sometimes even 6 other characters. He works so well in summons builds. He also works well in non-summons builds. you can completely disregard his passive and just focus on his buff bots, which are very, very powerful. So for that reason, I think he's really good. He does require itemization, so he can't just plonk him down for him to have an effect. He needs to have good items. He also needs mana regen. Without mana regen, his buffing is too slow and ineffective. He also, your team kind of has to be somewhat synergistic, like all attack damage, all spell power, or all hybrid maybe. Otherwise, the attack damage won't benefit the spellcasting characters as much. So you need to have a bit of strategy there. But once you have that strategy down, he is a monster. I think for all those reasons, he is low B. I am tempted to do high C, but the thing is, when you get Savos going, he annihilates. Your whole team has hundreds of extra attack damage or spell power. He increases your entire team's crit chance by like 20% or 30%. And that's not to mention, there's that helmet, that orange helmet, which duplicates all your team's passives. Savos' passive is so good to duplicate in a summon build. I love Savos. Savos is a lot of fun to play with. He's going to go in B, but his upside is certainly S tier. Like, his upside's S tier, his downside is D tier, so I'm splitting the difference and going B. Enjoy your place, mate. Cool. Next up, we'll go Ripley. And I just know this one is going to be controversial. So Ripley's passive is every 4 attacks, they heal the team 20% of the attack damage he has. So that's pretty good. That can scale healing for your team. His cast is a little interesting. So if you've got no summons, off the top of my head, I'm pretty sure it just gives him crit chance and attack speed, which is good. But if you have summons, it scales his attack damage by 5% per summons on the battlefield. So if you have a lot of summons on the field, he's scaling his attack damage quite high. Now, Ripley is difficult. He's extremely squishy because he comes in with like no max HP. He needs a base attack damage to scale with percent attack damage. And he is also in the thick of it. So because he's squishy and you're trying to focus on attack damage and mana regen to get him casting as much as possible, he can just get swatted away so easily. He also doesn't really work very well outside of someone's build. And the main thing I don't like about him is that once you choose to use him in a non-summons build, you can no longer pick up any single passive in the game which gives you a summons. Because as soon as you get one summon, it changes it to the other type of buff that he generates through his cast, and then it's not very powerful because you want more summons. So you either want a lot of summons or literally none. So I don't like the restrictive nature of the way he plays. I don't like Ripley. I don't like to be boxed in to one or another type of run. I like the pivot. I like the flexibility. And even in his upside, he's quite squishy. He also wants attack speed, by the way, so that he gets more healing out. So he's demanding, he's restrictive. I don't personally have too much fun with him. I do choose him quite a bit because he can work really well. If you've got a whole summoning team and you see Ripley, you slam dunk him. But even then, I find other characters better in that build than him personally. So like I'd rather Okar, for example, in any melee summon build than Ripley. For that reason, I'm putting Ripley in D tier. I think this ordering is wrong. I think Leuko is below Ripley, but I think that's the current ordering. All right, let's do a tank. I think we've shied away from tanks. Let's do Ava. So, Ava is a really cool character. Ava, their passive increases the defense based on the number of summons you have around you or heroes, and just the hero aspect of that alone is powerful enough. You don't need to worry if you're not a summon build. If you've got 4 heroes around her and herself, that's enough defense to keep her alive quite strongly at the start of the game. Then the next aspect is her cast. So every time she casts, this is off memory, I'll correct myself if I'm wrong, but she generates defense based off the number of frost on the enemy, and she scales damage based on the amount of defense that she has. So if you have a lot of frost on the enemy and she's casting a lot, she's generating a lot of defense and doing a lot of damage. I have literally accidentally had it so that she was my main damage dealer purely based on casting. So if you can get the frost armor, which applies frost every time she's hit, make her a bit tanky through items, and then increase her mana regen as much as possible, she can be a primary damage dealer and tank at the same time. She's all in one package. She does need frost though. So you need to apply frost, and I find that's not too difficult with the amount of characters you can choose to kind of turn that on. I love Ava. She is bonkers. She rarely lets me down as a tank. In fact, she's probably my most consistent does well tank. I'm actually going to put her in A tier for that reason. She does rely on frost, so you could argue with me that she belongs in B, but I think based on the fact Frost is easy enough to get through relics, items, other heroes, she's going to be an A. Love Ava. Okay, let's do another tank. Let's go Mr. Robot here. So Orion's deal is that every 2 attacks he applies a shock, and every time he stuns an enemy, he also applies another shock, which is quite powerful. His cast is really good. Concussive Strike does damage based on max HP, heals himself, and if he overheals, he gives shield to the entire team. So that's really powerful because if you keep his health really topped up through external healing, when he casts, he gives the whole team shield, which completely unlocks all shielding archetypes. And the beauty of that is you just need to invest max HP and mana into him. Interestingly, you'd think, oh no, I want attack speed because of Electric Strike. I would not recommend that. I'd recommend mana regen, spell power, and max HP on him to get this going. Because once he applies shield to the entire team, things like, for example, Zog gives everyone mana who has shield. These two pair up really nicely together. Completely ignore his attacks and just focus on shield with these two. And he's really strong. He also taunts the enemy, and because you want him to have a lot of max HP and he's generating shield, he can be quite beefy. I do find though, because he does want multiple things, mana regen, HP, spell power, he can be quite, if you don't get that balance right, he can be too squishy or he's not casting it off. And specifically, Concussive Strike's only good later on when you can keep his health topped up through your characters supporting him. So he doesn't do enough himself to heal to give everyone shield. So he depends on having that shield support. I like Orion, but that shield generation he does do is later in the game. His tankiness is okay. This ability's on him. You can focus on attack speed on him, but that's personally not my favorite way to do it. I think Orion's really balanced. I think Orion is straight into the C tier, and I would put him probably just below Nyria. Okay, so let's do Elora. Now I'm getting the name right. Elora is amazing. I find these Surge characters are quite overtuned a little bit. So let's start off with the easy ability to understand, Ethereal Infusion. Every damage she does is ethereal damage. It's that simple. The beauty of ethereal damage is it generates health from magic steal instead of life steal. And in this case though, ethereal infusion means life steal and magic steal both work with the infused attacks. So giving her a bit of life steal or magic steal means she generates a lot of health herself. And she benefits so greatly of ethereal amplification. If you get that recipe, which is like the claw looking thing, which gives you 60% base ethereal amplification, that's just 60% more damage on Elora. But the thing to think about is her cast. Now this is bonkers, and I didn't realize it worked this way until recently. Whenever you surge, Elora gets 20% attack speed, so that's the passive of that. I'm just going to focus on that for now. If you surge really quickly for whatever reason, because you've got Celeste going or items that make you surge, this can trigger multiple times. I've had it, so we surged 5 times in a row, like really quickly, and that generated 100% attack speed on her. So she was just attacking so rapidly, which made her cast. She became an absolute beast in that moment. So that passive is extremely strong, and essentially she's got like 2 passives for the price of 1. And then her cast is like ridiculous. It's bonkers. So she does attack damage based on her attack damage, 100% of it, but that also scales up based on the amount of ethereal damage she did before she did this cast, which might not sound like much, but it's a lot because all her damage is ethereal. So essentially all damage she does increases the damage of the next cast. That's just crazy. So if you scale ethereal damage and attack damage, this cast goes crazy, which also scales with attack damage because of her passive. I think Elora is overtuned to heck. She's so easy to play. You chuck on attack damage, done. Don't even need to worry about mana because her attack speed is so high that she's casting because of the attack speed. You apply any ethereal amplification on her and she's broken. She's easy to play. She works well in surge builds, she works well in ethereal builds, and she works really well in attack builds. She works well in all 3 of them. She turns none of them on, but she's just so powerful in any of them. She's a slam pick. And originally, before I was doing this video, I was thinking, because I did think about these characters, I was going to put her in A, but I think she's at the bottom of S. The reason she's at the bottom is because she doesn't unlock synergies, really. She just fully utilizes them around her. So, Elora, you're going in S. You've also got a great skin. Okay, so next up, let's go this little nugget. All right, you mate. You're in the shooting category. Jalen. So Jalen's deal is they increase their attack speed based on at the start of a fight, based on the attack speed bonuses they have, which is 30%, and every attack does a bit of healing. That healing is almost negligible. 20 is just not enough, even with really high attack speed. Even if you're attacking 5 times per second, which is insane, That's only 100 heals per second, which is not enough compared to someone like Rose, that you've got going over here. And it's only attack speed at the start of a fight. So if you scale attack speed over time, it does nothing for Brawler's Rage. Brawler's Rage is weak. Then you have his cast. So this is when things start to get really complicated for Jalen. When he casts, he gives everyone shield based on his spell power. So you want spell power, and it's because it's when you cast, you want mana regen. But the cast speed is slow unless you have attack speed. So you want attack speed, and that also works with his passive. So you want attack speed, mana regen, and spell power. And then through that, he gives the whole team attack damage based on the amount of shield he has. I have done everything I can to make Jalen work, and I've made him work, but he's never been that good. I've given him every single attack speed buff in the entire game with some mana regen, and it still wasn't that effective. He's just so squishy, and his issue is he's a melee character. He gets into the thick of it, and you're so focused on attack speed, mana regen, and spell power, you also need shield and health on him, because he's a tiny little nugget. Like, he just doesn't stay alive. I think for that reason, he's at the bottom of the D tier. I have tried, and I don't find him very fun, and he just hasn't worked for me. So please, this is one of those ones, I probably have him wrong. Let me know what you think. Next, let's go to the bottom of the list, Arya. Arya is an attack damage frost character. So her deal, let's get the thing up so I don't misspeak with her, because I'm a little foggy. So she's a stunning character, that's right. So if she's attacking the same character over and over, she increases her attack speed up to a total of 48%, which is just big. Then when she changes character, she does, however, lose all those stacks. But that's kind of okay, and I'm about to tell you why. So her cast is great. So it's an AoE attack damage that applies frost, and it stuns. She's a really good stunning character, and you can cast this more frequently if you've got a lot of attack damage. So you want attack speed on her, you also want mana regen, so the frozen arrow goes off more frequently. She does her own attack speed. The reason I like Arya, first of all, she can apply a lot of frost. This is quite good because it's casting so rapidly because of the attack speed scaling bonus that you have down there. But also, it's the stunning ability. So you might see this and think, oh, well, I don't want to reset my attack speed, but focus her on a boss. Get her attacking a boss that's going to survive for longer. She locks down a boss through her stunning while applying frost on them. Hopefully the AoE gives a bit of frost on everyone else. And then your whole team clears off the riffraff, and she just stays focused on the boss, and she's got a bonus 48% attack speed. Arya's good. Her ceiling isn't very high though. I find her damage is never that great. She's just a utility, and she works really well in her attack speed builds, stun builds, and frost builds. She's quite diverse. I like her a lot. Her ceiling's low, but her floor is really, really high. She's essentially just consistently good. Consistently okay. I think for that reason, she comes in at the bottom of the B to me. Arguably, top of C. I think actually, no, she's coming in at top of C because her ceiling isn't that high. It's hard to make her go bonkers. We'll get on to Cora. So Cora is a character that has a lot of text, and one I'm actually mildly unfamiliar with. So when she crits, she generates shield for herself, which is pretty cool. And when she casts, she does a distracting strike, and it does more damage based on the distance she travels away from the enemy. It also stuns them when she does that. So there's a lot going on here, and it's I find her difficult to make work. So first of all, she's generating shield, and she's a crit character. But she's also, her primary utility is max HP, because she heals herself based on max HP, but she also stuns. So she wants everything. She does so much. I don't enjoy that playstyle, because what I want to do is make this cast as much as possible, but it's kind of wasted. So if you have heaps and heaps of mana, she can't cast it until she walks all the way back to the enemy. What I think this should do, as a little buff, is that the more mana regen you have, the faster her movement speed. Now, I'm not sure if that's completely broken or not, but I just don't like that running. Essentially, she's a dead character while she's doing that running, and for that reason, I don't find her very fun. I've not given her enough of a go to rate her. I think she's got a really high potential. I just haven't utilized her enough. So she's actually going in the E tier for me. Next up to Cora, and Cora has a special place in my heart. Over time, she gives herself shield based on the number of summons on the field, and she does damage in a ring around herself based on the amount of spell power she has, and that damage also heals your team. So throw her in any summon build to give her more shield, and she becomes a shielding character. Throw her in any melee build, and she's a healer as well as damage dealer. I find she's very versatile. You can choose how you play her. She can be an off tank, she can be a damage dealing spellcaster, she can be a healer, she can be a shield generator. She just works really well. Her limitation is that she sucks in 1v1 fights, which is unfortunately a few of the boss fights, because her healing is based off her damage done. So if you are going to choose her as a healer, this is really important for Cora. If you're going to choose her as a healer, make sure you have another way to heal for individual boss fights, because she will carry you so hard through multi-fights. She will just burst everyone down, heal your entire team, you'll be laughing. She's so good in the final boss because there's so many enemies around you. But if you get, like, for example, Magic Potion on Chris, which is this ability here, that can cover for Cora's weakness, which is single target healing. So yeah, I really like Cora. You can invest in spell power, you can play her many different ways. I don't think she's that difficult to understand, but you can play her wrong. So if you focus on the summoning aspect when you should be focused on the healing and whatever, she can be played wrong. But I like her a lot. I enjoy her. I think top of the C. I think she's not B because you can play her wrong in every single way if you're not choosing your paths correctly. It's a bit harder to play Magmis, and it's a bit harder to play these characters wrong. And I just realized at the end of this, I will do a reshuffle, like a final reevaluation, just based on like relativity to each individual character. And I want to make sure most characters sit in the BC kind of area. Here, we'll do Retromania. Now, Retromania very recently was in the E tier for me because I didn't play him enough. Then he got a buff in the most recent patch where his damage was increased, and it was increased a lot. Where are you, Retro? You're a crit character, aren't you? Yes, you are. So he's more complex to understand, but I think you kind of don't have to think too much. So if he's got no spell power, he gets 35 spell power. And then if he has spell power, he increases his crit chance based on the amount of attack damage and spell power, whichever is lower. So he gives himself crit chance as long as you give him attack speed, attack damage, and spell power. So he can be quite good there. Then eventually, if you scale him hard enough, which is a little bit difficult to do earlier on, he can get Omni Crit, but there's some late game items that really make that very, very easy to do. I do like that he gives himself crit chance, so you don't need to worry about that. You can just focus on his hybrid spell power, damage, and physical damage. And then his cast is quite powerful. This is the thing that was buffed to 545%. Not a small buff, guys. Absolutely demolishes. So the damage is based on your attack damage and spell damage, whichever is lower. So you really do want to be increasing his physical damage up at the same time as you're increasing spell damage. I think he's a little complex. You can make him work, but he really does require items, but he does have a nice high ceiling based on the 545% damage. The cast is also cool. If it cleans up an enemy, it goes to another enemy. I think based on all that, the balance of complexity and high potential, he's in C. I would rate him higher than those two characters, but lower than these. I'd put Arya actually there, and I think that's correct for C. All right, time to go have some food so I can come back in fresh. All right, back from lunch, got a bit distracted. It's 9:44, but let's crack on in. Starting with Kasara. So Kasara's deal is that every time she casts, she increases her spell power by 15, up to a total of 75, which is quite significant. So essentially, if you give her really good mana regen through the Caster's Amulet or the Mana Book, she just scales up her own spell power. But what's really important about Kasara is her cast itself. So what she does is she sends out an orb that does more damage based on the distance it travels, and when it hits the enemy, it stuns them. Kasara is really, really strong. I'm just going to state it off of the bat. So she doesn't really have many synergies other than stun. She's like a neutral character, and she's so self-sufficient. All she needs is mana regen, literally, and then she's powerful. So what I tend to do is I grab her, throw a Caster's Amulet on it, and she's kind of sorted for all of the first act. Better yet, if you can get your hands on the Green Jade Dagger, which reduces max mana by 2, it reduces her cast total max mana from 5 to 3. And if you have a lot of mana regen with that, she's essentially chaining orb after orb, completely locking down one target, the furthest target from her. So if you use your 1 or 2 brain cells, you can position her such that she locks down the boss while you take out all the adds. Not to mention, even without any spell power or any items whatsoever, this orb does so much damage because it scales on distance. So you just need to place her tactically and she excels. Placement is her complexity. Beyond that though, she does a lot of damage with her orb with absolutely no item investment. Her utility is actually better than her damage, but her damage is good. So I love Kasara. She is such a slammable first pick because you don't close yourself off from synergies. She can go on every single build, she opens up stun, and then once you're done with her, kick her out. See you later. But she's good to the very late game with such a low investment. So I was going to put her in S tier, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to put her in high A tier. She's the highest A tier character for me, at least out of this lot right here. And the reason she's not S tier is for two facts. One is because she doesn't excel in AoE fights. When there's like 5 or more enemies, she's locking down less enemies than there are on the field compared to heroes. So we're still outnumbered, even if she locks down one character. So you have to have less enemies than there are heroes as a beginning for her to be very powerful. The next reason she's not in S is because her positioning matters so much. If you position her in the wrong spot, she's just a dead character. So if you fail on that, she really, honestly, she could be like a C tier character if you're positioning poorly. But I'm going to assume that people can place her like clearly away from the furthest enemy you want to hit, and also the maximum distance such that her balls do maximum damage. And she's a very strong A tier. Just put mana regen on her. Don't even worry about anything else. And there are also lots of items that go well with that. So if you really focus on mana regen, you can also put the staff that dishes out a shield, the emerald staff, which throws those healing orbs, and there's a few other items that go really well with mana regen, such as the Surge Generation book that gives you Surge every time you mana regen. So she's a very strong A character, and I like Kasara. Next we have Zotz. Zotz is, okay, I've said this a few times, so I'm going to say it again. Zotz is special. Zotz is my first favorite character of this game, and it makes a lot of sense why. Similar to Kasara, so that's why I kind of want to put them together, he requires no investment to be good in Act 1. He self-scales himself, so if I crack on open his abilities, where are you, mate? Roll, just go past here, Zotz. So first of all, his attack speed increases with his opponent's attack damage and spell power, whichever is lower. So as long as you're scaling both attack damage and spell power, his attack speed is also increasing with that. But interesting part's his cast. So first of all, AoE. We love AoE in Act 1 just to make sure you don't get outnumbered and swarmed. Second of all, buys a bit of shock, sort of opens up shock synergy a little bit. Not a huge amount, but 3 is nothing to be trifled with. And second of all, every time he does this, he gains 20 spell power and attack power. So every time he casts, he gets attack speed. So he is self-sufficient in the sense of his scaling. He is a hybrid character, and he works in the shock builds. I really like Zotz. He requires no item investment to be better than most characters in Act 1. That's just straight fact. And with a few books of mana, they're the perfect item for him because 1, it gives him that attack speed, but also gives him the mana regen so he's casting more and scaling faster. Book of mana, book of mana, book of mana, boom, Zotz is sorted. And then you just need to put that lollipop that I showed just before, or that's the Queen's Sword, which I showed, which increases damage, ethereal damage based on the debuffs of an enemy. And he goes off, he goes crazy. His damage is so high. So obviously he can't tank, his utility is quite low, but his damage is just so reliable. He is in the A tier. You can plunk him down and he does his thing. The reason he's not S is because he only takes himself so far. You then need to then strategize with items and equipment a bit more. And then I find he falls off a little bit. His scaling is quite weak in the end game. So he's a strong Act 1 and 2 character. By the end of Act 2, you're kind of thinking, unless you've itemized him correctly. So Zotz, welcome to the A group. You're better than these two. Cool, cool, cool. So now we've got Atreos, the burn tank. Let's get his page up. There we go. Atreos hiding from me. So his passive ability is time manipulation. So the less HP he has, the more money he has, which is really, really powerful. I like manipulation a lot. That could be 9 mana regen. So he's getting that mana regen to cast. So this is the important part. So every time he casts, he applies burn to the enemy. So he's an enabler of burn. He then gives himself 100 defense for 3 seconds. So as long as you're casting more than every 3 seconds with him, he has a bonus 100 defense, which is just like an astronomical amount of defense, especially for Act 1. You can get that cast time up. So giving him Cast Amulet or Book of Mana is very powerful here. He also taunts, which I really like. It makes him more of a reliable tank. So based on those facts, keeping it simple, just give him mana regen. And then you have the really powerful defense synergies. Now, the defense archetype is very strong if you can make it work. It's harder to put together, but once you do, it's very powerful. So Atreos is perfect in that build. He's the best tank in any burn builds that you have going on, and he's just reliable with mana regen, a bit of health, and a bit of defense. That's all he needs. I never ever worry about spell power on him, because he's not your damaging character. His job is to keep himself alive, apply burn on the enemy, and then potentially scale and damage off defense. That's the way I play him, and he's very reliable in that zone. So just give him HP, defense, and mana regen, and he's sorted. I really like Atreos. For that reason, I think he's really reliable. He's not crazy, so if you put him down, he doesn't do anything. Like, he doesn't damage, he just kind of stays alive, and that's only if he's itemized as well. Without items, his defense buff isn't up long enough, so he has a massive weak spot until he does that first cast or change those first casts. So he's in the B tier, and he's in high B. I think he's a really good tank. He's easy to use. Like I said initially, he outperforms most of the C tier characters. So let's crack on into another burn character, Blake. So Blake's deal is that he gets instant lifesteal in the game. When the game starts, he gets lifesteal, which means he's got a bit of survivability. Second of all, every time he attacks, he increases his attack damage by 2%, up to a total of 40%. So that's really powerful. 40% additional attack damage means that you can just focus on base attack damage with him, and he's going to scale himself up just naturally through War Machine. So that's honestly one of the more powerful passives, I think, in the game for any attack damaging character. But this is where I think he gets let down a little bit. This tiny boy has Molten Kunai. So, sorry, just having flashbacks to Naruto and Naruto Shippuden, best anime ever. Maybe showing my age there. But anyway, Molten Kunai. So he applies 2 burn to all the enemies hit. It's an AoE attack damage, and it scales with attack damage and spell power. And it also can get cast more frequently based on attack speed. So with some mana, attack speed, attack damage, and spell power, he can do a lot of damage. But I just said 4 things that he needs. So he's very needy with those things there. He also is quite squishy in the backline, and his burn application isn't that great. So he's not really that synergistic with the burn team. I'd rather Magmis every day of the week. I'd rather Atreos, probably not Eagar, to be honest, but I'd rather Ola. But really where he excels is the War Machine. So I tend to typically focus him on attack damage and sometimes crit, because his base crit chance is 20%, which that absolutely nothing to be sneezed at. So I think his floor is quite high. He comes in, War Machine makes sure he kind of stays alive, he scales himself a little bit, he's got base 20 crit chance, he's starting, honestly, at the base of C, but his ceiling is, I struggle to push him into A. And honestly, like sometimes B's a bit of a struggle for him too, unless I'm really thinking about him and taking my time in the match. But I don't want to be sitting there all day, like itemizing him and strategizing with him. And for that reason, I think he's probably, bottom of the B, because you can't just put him down and give him attack damage and he does things. It's just what he does beyond that requires, I guess, a bit more planning and synergies to pop off. Haha. So, let's do Rose and Naomi together. They're not really the same, but I'm just going to do it because they have a similar role a lot of the time. First of all, Rose. Rose is a healer who casts an AoE heal that forms a ring on the ground that does a healing over time. So if I can just find her, that would be great. So here she is. So her passive is that every time she heals, she gives spell power to the whole team, which is 30 spell power. That's pretty good. 30 base spell power can do a little bit for everyone, but it's just a little bit. So I wouldn't go crazy about team power. Then she's got Divinity. So this is one of the better healing things in the game, because it targets the best healing for your team, which means it targets the most allies it possibly can, and then starts healing them over time. This is a very powerful heal. Issue with healing is 2 things. In the early game, you want attack damage or spell power to kill the enemies, otherwise you're just going to get taken out. Doesn't matter how much you heal, the enrage mechanic will counteract any healing you do, because they're going to outscale your healing. You want to kill them as fast as you can. Then, in the late game, every single hero tends to have some form of magic or lifesteal, and if you focus on their attack damage, that's so much self-healing for each individual character that Rose's healing kind of becomes a bit redundant. And so I used to love Rose, keeping my team, because I wasn't very good at the game. She kept my team alive, she kind of pushed me through those early barriers, but I realized it's because I was misplaying my other characters. And over time, I've actually gone away from Rose. However, there is a few origins specifically which go crazy with her, which I'll pop up on the screen. I can't remember the names, but one of them essentially, every time you overheal an enemy, it does damage to them. So Rose is like, oh, nah, crispy in that one there. And then what did I mention? I said we'll look at Naomi next. So I really shouldn't do these girls together because they really have very different functionality. So Naomi is like what I was thinking was the shield equivalent of Rose, which is not true. So first of all, every time she generates mana, she gets spell power up to 80. Now 80 is, that's juicy. Honestly, without anything, Naomi has 5 mana regen. Then if you look at her cast, so the cast is annoying in the sense that it targets the unit with the most shield received, but good in the way that you can put items on units to increase their shield receive, so it's intentionally targeted to those units, such as your tank. So if you want your tank to have as much shield, you put Naomi down, you give him like that cape or like one of the many items that increases shield received, and she'll target that unit. Then she's got the secondary ability, which is very interesting. The more shield they have, the more attack speed they have. That is actually very, very powerful on the right tank. So this is a lot of attack speed, up to like, I don't know, off the top of my head, probably like 80% or something if they're fully shielded, which goes crazy with a tank that wants to hit as much as possible, such as Naka. Every time Naka gets a shield, he increases his attack speed. Every time he attacks, he can, for example, if you have the Giant's Hand, he's applying all that ethereal damage, or you can give him an item that just procs on attack, such as that Burning Sword, which applies a burn, or just like, there's lots of items that do on attack procs. So Naomi pairs really well with Naka. The thing is, a lot of tanks don't care about attacking quickly. Atreos, why would he care about attacking quickly? He's at the minimum spell power and not attack damage. So I find a lot of the time this attack speed buff is wasted. It's not actually that good. So it's a little bit overrated because at face value, like, oh my god, having 100% attack speed is great, but it doesn't actually apply like that. So I think both the characters have their niche, but they definitely have their downfalls. Similar to Rose, I want to be focusing on attack damage, and everyone has their own self-sustain to an extent. However, the benefit of Naomi is the orange relics. There's one item which distributes all their shield to the entire, one character's shield to the entire team. And there's another item that gives them shield based on all the team's shield. So if you have, it's the Sierra. So if you have the Sierra shield on your tank and Naomi, then all the shield Naomi's getting in the tank is going to the rest of your team. So in a one unit and one item combo, your whole team is shielded, which is very powerful. So in those cases, I love Naomi. She's very strong. So I guess that's what differentiates between the two. I find Rose is more generically good, just keeping your team alive, giving them a little bit of spell power. But the niche applications of Naomi are much more powerful. She has a much higher ceiling based on the item combinations, the heroes, and all that bits and pieces. But you can't just kind of put her in and expect to see results. She won't do anything. She won't do enough. So I guess Rose is like, I guess, a higher floor, lower ceiling. Naomi has a lower floor, higher ceiling. But those ranges converge at the same location for me, and that is C. They are just well balanced. And if I had to choose one based on vibe, it's Rose. If I had to choose one based on like actual performance, it's probably Naomi. And out of these characters, I reckon they're both better than Rinji and Alec and Retromania. And I'm gonna put Naomi first because Naomi, I think, is the better character between the two. Let's go into 9. 9 is a surge character, and I did mention that I think surge characters are pretty busted. 9's ability here means that every time you surge, you get percent spell power and percent attack damage. The key there is its percent. And the key also is surge. So you can surge at a cap, a maximum of 12% without any other relics or whatever. So 12 times 4 is 48. So that's 48% more spell power and attack damage. That's a lot, especially if you increase his base attack damage and spell power with items, which you do want to do because he is a hybrid character. Now he does have a cast. When he casts, he does damage based on your attack damage and spell damage at a percentage. You can just read it there, whichever is lowest. So you do want to kind of mutually raise them or raise spell power half as much as attack damage to get that same kind of damage of the cast. And then he has a 50% heal from that, which is a big heal. So if you get him casting frequently, give him a little bit of health to make it so he's not one-hittable, then he's very, like, he has a lot of survivability. He just doesn't die. And that in combination with the items that increase your surge cap, like there's a coin which increases your surge cap by 10, there's an item which increases your surge cap by 5. If you're just increasing surge cap and you've got good surge generation, 9 can go crazy. And just like Zotz and just like Magmis, he holds those two hybrid items very well. I like 9 a lot. He comes in and he's okay without items. His ceiling is insane. I think I regularly get him as my maximum damage dealer, and I think he's fun. Just the fact that he has his own inherent base percent scaling means you can focus on flat damage, and then he just kind of takes off. So, where did I put him? I put him in C for the time being. I think based on the complexities of his playstyle, so you need to generate surge. You need to focus on attack damage and spell damage. He's not going to be high A. I would be tempted to put him in low A, except honestly, as a new player, I probably wouldn't focus on him too much, just while you're learning all the different synergies. And in fact, what I did is I played the game thoroughly before I even turned Surge on. So I think for that reason, he's high B. He is on the cusp of A, absolutely. Alright, fine, let's go to Ryu. Ryu is another hybrid character, kind of, who scales his attack damage based on shield. So he gets shield from it when he attacks, he consumes 200 shield, and he increases his attack damage. Then when he actually procs this off, he gets 50% lifesteal and 50% magic steal for 5 seconds, which is very powerful. That is so much regen. Like he's just healing back all the damage he's doing. So with his cast, he shoots a thing in a line and it does damage, and based on that damage you get the shield, which is good because that shield can proc the offensive wisdom. The thing is that shield does degenerate over time, so it's not like a permanent buff to his defense, otherwise he'd be too broken. So I am glad it does work that way, otherwise he'd be too strong. He's a very strong character. First of all, his cast is really good AoE. He has really good inherent attack damage and self-shield generation. Not enough to make him really tanky, but enough to get his procs off for offensive wisdom. So if you give him a bit of spell damage, which goes well for the shield generation, and a bit of attack damage to go well with his offensive wisdom, he can lay down the damage. He has his own inherent survivability. He's just a really good package. I really like Ryu, and not to be forgotten, he's got 5 max mana. Any character that has 5 max mana, you should be thinking about the Jade Dagger, because the Jade Dagger is going to nearly halve his cast time, so he's going to be laying down the Dragon's Wrath and just slaying these enemies. Good in AoE fights, good in single target. He's a really strong character. I like him a lot. He's going to go in A. I really do think that. On the lower side of A. Just because he's that little bit more simple than someone like 9. He doesn't have that layer of needing to worry about shield. He does his own shield. You don't need to worry about magical attack steal, because he's generating his own. All you need to do is give him attack damage, spell power, and maybe some mana so he's casting a little bit more frequently, and he is A-okay. Ryu is awesome. Now, for the flagship of defense, we have Elios. Elios is a really interesting character, I think very well designed, and straight up, I'm just going to reveal it from the start, he's in C tier. So when he casts, he sends out an aura that increases the defense of everyone around him, and his passive is that he gets life regen based on his defense. The reason Elios is good, first of all, he's an enabler for the defense build. He completely turns on Terros, he makes Atreos and any tank you have a lot stronger, and he makes your whole team survivable. And the beauty is you can get the procs happening reoccurringly. Hopefully, actually, I can just show you here. So you can see that orange circle. So anyone within that gets the defense. So if you get enough mana regen, that's just up permanently. So your whole team's getting, in this case, without any buffs, 30 defense. But it's not hard to scale that up further. You give them a few items. That can be 100, 150. That could be, I've had 1,000. I've had it, so Elios procs, and then he gives everyone 1,000 defense, which made his old mate Terros go crazy with it. And honestly, I might just do Terros at the same time. So Terros' deal is that he sends out earthquakes based, and they do damage based on defense. So the more defense he has, the more damage he's dealing here. Interestingly, his attack speed is very, very low, but his crit chance is very high. So what it means is he's attacking infrequently and critting most of the times he's shooting out his little rocks. His passive means that every time he crits, which is most of the time, he does ethereal damage based on defense. So Atreos is hungry for a bit of attack speed. Definitely hungry for capping his crit chance, just so you don't lose out on that 30%. He wants more defense, and a bit of spell power to make its earthquakes more damaging. These two pair crazily well together, but the thing is, Terros needs someone like Elios or needs really heavy kit of items. Elios can kind of just be plunked in any team and make any team better. So for that reason, let me put him up here. I think Elios is a strong C candidate. He enables defense, and that's about all he does. He doesn't ever really do much damage because he's got no offensive capability, and he is melee, so he does get into the thick of it, putting himself at danger. I would love to put Elios in B, but he only enables defense, which is a rare synergy. There aren't many characters that go well with it. There are a few cool items that go with it, which I'll put up on screen now, but that's about it. So I'm going to put him in the C tier because he completely unlocks defense. So Terros, on the other hand, he is dependent on defense. He needs to be built up. When he's built up correctly, Terros can rain earthquakes. He can split the earth in half, have all the enemies fall inside, and then you'll never see them again. His damage can be astronomical, but you have to build him right. You have to have the right synergies. I think for that reason, he is a very good C tier candidate. And I'm going to put him on the lower side of C tier because he just requires so much setup. I think he's probably better than these two, but lower than Azura. Before we crack into the next hero, I completely forgot to mention Happy Easter. Take a look at what I was just given. A massive Easter bilby. Yep, that's right. Not bunny, but a bilby. There we go. From Hades. This thing is going to be delicious. And I've also got some eggs and bunnies as well. But yeah, if you don't celebrate Easter, have a good holiday and enjoy the time off. I hope you get some days off like I have. So we're going to crack in now. So we've got Azar's next. So Azar's deal is he is a shielder. So his Eternal Shield, which is his passive, means every 4 attacks he generates shield on himself. And at the start of the battle, he loses max HP and gives himself some shield. So he's a very good self-shielding character by that regard. And what's not to be underestimated is the shielding strike. So this is an AoE cast that has a very high base damage, 285. Absolute thumbs up. But the fact is, he starts with shield because of his passive, which scales up his attack damage. You can see that it scales up by 100%. You can do double the damage. Azar is a fantastic early game pick, but for me, he falls off a cliff afterwards because neither of these things really scale. It just self-generates shield. It's kind of hard to work with these beyond that. There's a few items that go well with him. I typically find he's just a good character. He's always not underperforming. He's always kind of performing, essentially, but he's never my top tier character. He's never the broken, destroys everything and the whole team's supporting. So I think he's a really good character for that regards. I think he's extremely beginner friendly for that. You can just grab him, put him down, maybe give him a bit of spell power, give him a bit of mana, and he goes off. So I'm going to throw him in the lower end of B, probably above old here, because he just comes down, does a lot. He doesn't really require much investment or thought. He generates his own shield, which is what he scales off of, so you don't actually need to think. He just goes boom, and the enemies explode. Okay, so let's do Celeste. Celeste is one of the newer characters, and she's in the Surge synergy. So her passive is Mana Battery, which generates energy every time she regenerates mana, and that energy can allow you to surge. So she's actually a Surge enabler. But more interestingly is her cast. So it's a cast that does a buff that lasts for 5 seconds to your entire team. It gives mana regen to your entire team based on surge level. So essentially what you want to do with Celeste is get your surge level as high as possible and cast Rune of Unity as frequently as possible. This one character can give your entire team mana regen. So kind of similar in a way to how I discussed Gerald, how he's one unit that turns on crit. Well, Celeste is one unit that semi-turns on energy via Mana Battery, but completely turns on mana regen. So it strips away the need for the mana regen items for your entire team. There is a difference though. Gerald comes down, he casts his aura, everyone's critting. Celeste comes down and she builds up over time because you need to get your surge level higher to get her active. But I do think she's such a good enabler of surge and mana regen to your team. And nearly every character wants mana regen. There are a few builds that don't, such as a few crit characters or some max mana characters that don't want mana regen. But seriously, every other character does. Even like Savos, I'm a fanboy. She does have a higher mana, so you really want to stack up the mana regen in her as high as you can get it, so she's casting and giving that mana to the rest of the team. I really like Celeste. I think she's a very strong character. She's also really simple. You put her down, you give her mana regen, done. Nothing else. You just don't worry about her. In a very similar nature to Kasara, you chuck on the staff that gives out shield based on mana regen, you give out the emerald wand or staff to her as well, and she becomes a crazy utility, one that generates surge, mana for the team, and healing shielding. She is sick. I really like her. She is probably on the lower end of A. The thing is, she's really pushing it, to be honest. I like her a lot because of all the utility she has, but there are some builds she fails in. She could be at the higher end of B. I think. Let me just take a little sanity check here. Would I rather any of these characters than her? Like, I'd probably rather her than Ryu personally, but I think Ryu's better for beginners. So, and I think actually Ava's on the lower end of A, now that I kind of think about it. Let's put Celeste in the bottom of A, and then we can always like massage it later. We've got Eagar. So Agar's an interesting character, and if you've watched my videos, you've seen that I've tried him time and time again and tried different tactics. I can't quite get him to work. So his passive is that every second hit he generates either burn or frost, and then if he's on low health, he essentially exhausts the frost off the enemy and heals himself. That's kind of okay. And then Boomerang Axe it does damage based on the number of burns to the enemy and scales with attack speed. So he shoots it off faster with attack speed. So he wants attack speed, he wants some spell power for that ability, you want burns on the enemy, and you probably want a bit of attack damage on him as well, because he's up in the thick of it. Eagar wants a lot, and I have built him in so many different ways, and he's never been the A tier character. He's always been middle or bottom of the pack for me. I think despite these mechanics being simple, there are so many of them. He's quite a complex character, personally, that's what I find. And I think his passive is pretty garbage. I think every second attack rotating between burn and frost is not good enough. It should be every second attack apply a burn and a frost, or maybe every third attack apply a burn and a frost. I want them both on him because typically I either want him in a burn or frost build. There aren't many builds that go well with both. It's either one or the other. So he's kind of like half good in both of them, and like Blake is just applying so much more burn than him in a burn build, and all the other frost characters apply more frost. So I think for the complexity he has, the low ceiling, I'm gonna chuck him in D, and I think he's probably somewhere around there in D for me. Just above old chicken nugget. Oh, Emily. Anyone that plays this game becomes a pretty strong Emily fan pretty quickly when you realize how much damage she can put out. And I've got a few tips that I like to use for her, a few items that just go bananas, bonkers, cringe. Okay, so let's just focus here, spec. She's got Astral Sword. Every attack she does additional ethereal damage based on spell power. So give her spell power and boom, her attacks are doing ethereal damage. And if you have ethereal amplification for your team, then that's just going to scale up her damage even further. Great Sword of Light it's interesting. It plunks down this massive sword that crunches on the enemy, as you can see in that animation, and it scales off spell power and attack speed. So essentially on Emily, what you want is as much spell power as possible because it scales both these things here. Now, what I'm going to mention is, I think this is a little unintuitive, but someone actually recommended to me this on the Discord, and it works really well. Give Emily the staff that increases max mana, give her the axe that increases max mana, so she's attacking quickly, and she's attacking with extra spell power, which scales her damage. Just completely forget that Great Sword of Light exists. Actually ignore it completely. Yes, it's a really good ability, but you can do way more if you just focus on Astral Sword. And there are so many items in this game that go well with max mana and spell power and attack speed. And I am going to put them on screen because I can't remember them off the top of my head. There's the Surge Trumpet, which scales spell power based on surge, not surge level, based on the amount of max mana that you have. There's also the Crystal Wand, or Mace, I want to call it, that increases spell power based on the number of crits she does, and she's got a base crit chance of 25, so she's already off to a good start with that. And there are a few other items that just go really hard on Emily that I would recommend. Anything that really scales ethereal damage obviously is quite good. So Emily's really easy to make, especially when you just remember those items which you don't typically want on your other characters. So it's nice. So when you roll those items, you don't need to roll past them. You can grab them, throw them on Emily. You don't need to roll down your health over and over for items. Emily is very powerful. She comes down, she destroys, she has a high impact when you put her on the board, till late game actually. In fact, the only way Emily doesn't do well, in my opinion, is if you're probably building her wrong, or she doesn't quite fit in with the team. She is bottom of the S. I think, or honestly, pretty close tie between Elora and Emily. Emily is just nuts. Give her a go if you haven't used her. get into Ethereal. Ethereal is one of the most broken mechanics of this game once you learn how to do it properly. Let's go Flynn. Let's go Flynn. So Flynning Boy, my man over here, he is a shot character. His passive ability does spell damage based on mana regen. So the more mana regen, the more damage he's just doing, I guess, naturally through that ability. Then with his cast, he shoots off a ring around your unit, the unit with the most max HP, might I add. And that ring does damage, it shocks the enemy. A few things to consider for Flynn. Mana regen's important because it scales his passive and also means he casts Lightning Nova more. The stun is quite effective. It really locks out enemies in the fight and it does multiple enemies. This is an AoE stun. That's very powerful. But he does have 10 max mana. 10 max mana means he's not casting it that frequently, so you really want to get as much mana regen as possible, and even maybe some minus max mana through, you know, that Mushroom Relic. I really do like that Mushroom Relic on people like Flynn. Because he's so desperate for mana regen, it's hard to scale his spell power, I guess, equivalently, and he gets torn between the two. At least when I play him, that's the way I feel. I think Flynn's a really good character. I think he requires a bit of logic to kind of balance out his items. I think to start him off, all he needs is mana regen to get these two going. He works in stun builds, he works in shock builds. That's about it there. And he's a very good C candidate. I'd rather play Flynn than these characters here. So right now he's like perfectly in the center of C for me. On the topic of Ethereal just after Emily, let's go to Vinrak. So Vinrak's deal is he hits with Ethereal strikes. So if I can just find him in this list here. Vinrak, why are you hiding? There you go. So Vinrak's deal is that he gives himself some base ethereal amplification, and every attack he does 30 ethereal damage. So you want him to attack as quickly as possible to utilize that combination, which is good because his cast is a buff that scales up with max mana, which is interesting. Gives himself ethereal amplification and attack speed. Vinrak's potential is nuts. The thing is, though, you need to balance it out carefully. So you see that when he casts his buff, and this goes for any character that wants to cast a lot and a lot and a lot, is that if they're casting, they're not attacking. So if you want a character that needs to attack a lot, but also cast, you can disrupt the amount of attacks you're doing just from casting. So for example, if he had 100 mana regen, all he'd be doing is sitting there, casting his aura off and off, which does nothing. His aura supports his attacks. So he requires a bit of game logic to get his aura strong enough and casting enough to allow the attacks to go off. Vinrak's a bit of a delicate balance between mana regen, spell power to increase full moon, but also, I guess, if you want to give him a bit of crit or some items. He's on the more complex side of characters. However, if you can get him working, he breaks the game. He can be, honestly, his peak, in my opinion, is higher than Emily's. He can be really up there with one of the biggest damage dealers, but it's very hard to make it work. Even sometimes when I'm trying, I don't make it work, and I just focus on my other 4 characters. But if the stars align, the items drop your way, boom, you have Wolfie Boy coming in there, clawing away the enemies, doing his damage. I think, for that reason, he's very well balanced, but I would not recommend him for a new player. So I will put him at the bottom of C. Tempted to put him in D, but I think that's a little unfair. I like Vinrak. Okay, let's do Zog. His passive is really powerful. So if he has a lot of spell power, he casts out a shield every 4 seconds to you, like the hero with the lowest HP. That's a lot of survivability. It also turns on shield builds, and it means you can do cool things like give your tank Sierra, and then the shield goes on the tank, and then that shield goes to your whole team, which synergizes very well with Thunderstorm. So Thunderstorm does an AoE attack damage, pretty powerful, 3 shocks to enemies, pretty decent in terms of shock application, and gives 1 mana regen to all allies with shield other than Zog himself. So if you find a way to get Zog casting a lot, he can give mana to your entire team, just like Celeste. The difference is Celeste requires less setup. She's a snowball that gets bigger and bigger as you surge, whereas Zog requires your team to have shield. This won't do it. The shield, spell shield won't be enough. You need other characters, synergies, and items to get that going. Once you do, Zog is a very powerful endgame character if built correctly. At the start, he's not very impactful. He needs quite a bit of investment to get him going. I think Zog is a perfect C candidate, and I think he's actually on the higher end of C for me, because his upside is so juicy. I love any character I mentioned before. Any character that can strip away 1 stat for your entire team gives you freedom in what you can do with those characters. Zog gets rid of mana, Celeste gets rid of mana, Gerald gets rid of crit chance for your team. you know, in a way, Kasara nullifies one boss enemy, so you can focus on ads and focus in that way. Then you've got Elios, who gives defense to the entire team. All these characters are very strong in their own right. And most importantly, I'd say Savos, because he gives your entire team attack damage or spell power. These are very powerful abilities. It's just a matter of what other utilities do they have. So Zog's going in C because he starts off slow and has less of an impact than those other characters. Mr. Pumpkin. So Mr. Pumpkin's cool because, first of all, he's got a pumpkin head. So Halloween, yes. Then next of all, he's got Dazing Defense. So in the Dazing Defense's deal is that when he stuns an enemy, he gets defense and max HP, which is really strong. So you give him some items which stun the enemy, and boom, he's scaling himself to be a really powerful off-tank. But his base defense is 10. So he is going to get flattened like a pancake unless you give him something to start with. Just because you have this ability doesn't mean you shouldn't be giving him defense. So I like putting a shield on Mr. Pumpkin. Keep him alive until he gets this going. And then once he's got that going, he'll just be unkillable. His cast is interesting, Pumpkin Storm. I'm just going to skim over it, but essentially he stuns the enemy periodically over time. And he actually doesn't benefit from casting at all. So what you want to do is give him max mana items because there's no benefit to casting. You actually don't want him to cast. You want that delayed out. So any single item that increases max mana, and there's a few cool relics, recipes that do that, go really well on Mr. Pumpkin. I find, other than in the stun build, he's just a really good character in isolation. He does his own stunts to fuel his own passive. So you don't need to worry about a team synergy going. He kind of fits in well. There's been many builds, like a Frost build, where I've just put him in because I need an off-tank. I need someone, because my tank's not quite strong enough, I need someone else diffusing the damage that's on the board. He's very good for that reason. But he's never the star of the show. In a stun build, he's pretty good, but that's stun builds, I guess, not that common. I guess they are okay in shock builds. He really depends on items to scale. And then, if he's got a lot of health and defense, he can still be squishy at the very start. I think Pumpkins can go in D. That's just because he requires quite a bit of setup. He doesn't quite fit well in some builds. And I always typically find I want to replace him in a build. I want another character that's more synergistic with my team. So I'm putting him in D because some characters have to go on D, guys. That one doesn't feel quite great, but C's getting a little bit crowded over here. I guess that's the way it should be. Okay, let's go Karina. And this one is probably my most controversial pick. I don't play Karina very often. She is a crit character that has a little bow and arrow. Her passive is she gives herself crit chance based on the shield she has and gives herself a teeny bit of shield. So if you find a way to give her more shield, she's going to increase her crit chance. And then her cast is just an arrow that pierces the enemies that can have omni crit. So it means her spell can crit. In a way, she's designed such that she has no weakness. She has Omnicrit already. She's hybrid, so even if you give her spell power, she's good. She casts more with attack speed, so you can focus on attack speed. You can get more mana to get more cast out there. She's got no weakness. And she also gets that crit chance from the shield, but she doesn't generate much shield. I just find her, and this is why it's controversial, I find her really boring. She fits in every build, like literally. In isolation, she could just be thrown in, but she doesn't really help anyone else out other than herself. And if I'm choosing a character that doesn't help anyone but themselves, I sure as heck want them to have a massive impact on the field, such as Zico or maybe even Lynn. I don't choose Karina very often. This is a complete IMO one. She's going in E. And I know this one is going to be outrage, but I'm sorry, I just don't play it. And I don't want to lie. I want to give you my honest opinions. Next, I'm going to go Eagar. So, Eagar? Oh boy, have I been hot and cold on Eagar. He is a crit summon character. So you know I like crit, you know I like summon. That might put you in one direction, but I'm going to let's just hold back until I go through all his abilities and talk him through. So, every time he crits, he heals himself, but most importantly, his summons by max HP. There are some crazy synergies with this passive alone. First of all, healing summons is good for Savos. Because Savos' little summon buff bot lose health over time. Eagar can keep them alive. He can keep them going over time. So what that means is that because they're staying alive and not dying, first of all, they're doing more damage. Second of all, it means that Savos can get a second, third, maybe even fourth round of those bots out. That is just bonkers. So Eagar and Savos are probably the two strongest characters together, but Not only that, Savos's base passive increases crit chance, and Eagar needs to crit to actually go up with critical healing. So Eagar mixed with Savos is just ridiculous. Like, it's the best pairing of two characters in the game, in my opinion. If you see those two in your first picks, you pick them. It's a lot of fun. I love summon builds. I love crit builds. And then on Savos, you can give him attack damage, so it gives attack damage to Eagar. So they help each other out in turns. They both give each other crit. They both give each other attack damage, and you can focus on other things. On Eagar's cast, he summons a wolf if you don't have two already. And these wolves do attack damage based on Eagar's attack damage. If you give Eagar some spell power, it increases how much attack damage is given to his wolves. So that's really important. It's actually really good to give Eagar more spell power, because then more percentage of his attack, and hopefully you can scale his attack through Savos or through something else, like some items or your relic. He can go crazy with these wolves. The thing is, the wolves also want his health. They want his attack speed. So far we've listed everything Eagar wants. He wants health, attack damage, attack speed, definitely spell power, crit chance, and crit damage would be pretty good on him as well to get those bigger hits in. He wants 6 different stats, and he has 3 item slots. He is super, super needy, and for that reason, he is being nerfed down. In my mind, like, if you get him in the right circumstances, he's like S+. So get him, Savos, get the tank that has the summons, the healing summons. Just get as many summons as you can, and boom, Eagar's your biggest performer with very little effort. Without those things, he does nothing. He needs the health to get more, he needs his own max health to get critical healing, doing more healing to his team. He needs the spell power to get his wolves getting more attack damage. He needs a crit chance to be healing to begin with. So he needs so many things. And I think for that reason, I was going to put him in A. That's how much I like Eagar. But I think I'm actually going to put him in C, because he doesn't work alone and he needs such heavy itemization. He's more of a, once you've had that setup done, he comes in and destroys everything. But I am going to put him at the high side of C, because once you do have a few of those things going, his damage is always top tier. Like, he always quickly becomes my best character in the builds that he's in. But he has to be in those builds. He can't just be an isolated character in like a shock build or a burn build. You need him in the summon build. Oh, also, he's got some wolves, and I really like that. If you haven't seen, there's a Reborn which has an icon of a wolf that perfectly matches his dogs, but in like a feral state. And that Reborn matches perfectly with Eagar, so it shares out the crit chance and damage to all summons on the field. Very powerful, and it's so busted with Eagar. Let's go Layla. While on the topic of summons and pets and wolves and beasts and such. So where are you, Layla? You go under the health category. So her passive's straightforward. When every 500 HP loses, she gets lifesteal, so she can have a total of 40% lifesteal. Next up, when she casts, she sends out a bear. As by default, her bear shares her health. They share it together and share stats, except the bear gets 125% of Layla's defense. So that's a little hint on how to play that bear. Next, when you cast, it heals the bear based on damage and taunts targets. So that's really interesting. And one thing I want to point out here is it's the bear that taunts, not Layla. Layla's just chilling back with a little crossbow, picking off units. It's the bear that's in the thick of it, getting aggro. That's really important for a few reasons. So any of those armors, 1, 2, and 3, that dish out debuffs based on getting hit, do nothing on her, because her bear's getting hit, but she's wearing the armor. Really important to note. She wants a lot of stats, because the bear, the whole deal about the bear is they're healing themselves a lot through rapid recovery and the cast here. So the bear wants attack damage, so they're healing more from the hits. They want spell power, so that the actual cast does more damage. They also want attack speed, so they're attacking more frequently, but most importantly, they want defense and health, because they share the same health pool. That's important. But the defense, the more defense that Layla has, goes to the bear. What I like to do is defense is the best stat to go with, because it upscales to the bear. So the bear, I guess, essentially makes any defense item 25% better than what it's currently displayed as. I like the bear a lot. It's kind of hard to actually play them poorly, because every stat goes well except for crit. So if you just ignore crit with Layla if you're early into the game and focus on literally any other stat, and she's going to do okay. Throw on that heavy mace that gives her attack damage and health. Throw on the armor that gives her health and defense or whatever. She's going to carry it well. So she's actually quite a beginner-friendly tank. And she's more juiced, like, because of this 25% defense buff that she gets, she's more default defensive than any other tank. other tanks can be built stronger than her, in my opinion, but she just starts off really good and she stays there. She doesn't really drop to being poor. Another thing to consider is that healing. Healing does quite well. So for example, Rose has her aura heal that heals everything in the circle. It's healing all allies. My understanding is this would heal the bear as well. Now, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I'm pretty sure that Divinity would heal the bear. So if it's healing the bear and Layla at the same time, you're getting twice as many heals on the same unit because they share the same health pool than you normally would. So Layla can be extremely survivable with a bit of healing and a bit of defense. And actually, I've had Layla do crazy damage. The bear hits like a truck. I really like Layla. I think they're a really good tank. And because of how beginner-friendly they are, I'm going to put them at the top of B. All right, where are we up to? So many characters to get through. All right, let's do Zico. It's time. It's time to do one of my favorites and the original chunky nugget that I call him every time I play this game. So Zico is this little guy with a sword, and he's just an aggro little dude. So Zico's deal is they have a tiny amount of max HP. I just want to start with that. Give him the Jade Dagger. He's casting a lot. Boom. Happy chappy. Second of all, his cast. So his cast is interesting because it scales off attack damage, not spell damage. In fact, spell damage does nothing for him. Ignore spell damage. And you know I love it when there's a stat that's stricken off the record. His cast, Flip Strike, does damage based on attack damage, so you focus on attack damage. Give him a Jade Dagger, he's casting it quite a lot. And give him a bit of mana regen, and boom, he is a casting Flip Strike machine. Essentially, this replaces his default attack if you're casting it enough, which is really good because it has a buff aspect to it. If he's above 65% max HP, he consumes health to increase his attack damage. He has innate scaling and it's unlimited. There is no stacks here. He can keep doing it over and over. The only limitation to this is it's based on having more than 65% max HP. Now, this doesn't reduce, my understanding is that this doesn't reduce your max HP, it consumes it. So you can heal it up and then buff yourself again. And that's really good because his passive gives him lifesteal per missing HP. So he comes in, he does a Flip Strike, increases his physical damage, he heals up from Survival Instinct and does it again, and so the cycle repeats, and he does so much damage. Zico is extremely easy to build. He comes in with no items and scales up and has sustainability. Zico is a little imbalanced in my opinion. He's just so easy to play, he does so well. I can put one brain cell of effort into him and he is at the top damage dealer. He works well in so many builds. I think the crit build, or at least the ethereal mana regen attack damage build, I'll show you the items on the screen now when you mix these ones together, is the strongest build in the game, and it goes really well on Zico because he casts quite frequently, and that's just so much more damage. I think Zico is nuts, and he definitely deserves to be in A tier. He is close to being an S, and the reason he's not an S is because these guys have better utility or better ways to scale beyond the limit. So Zico relies on a few items to get going. These guys come in and do quite a lot. Actually, so does Zico, but just not as well as these guys. So Zico is top of the A for me, taking over Kasara. I love Zico. So on the topic of summoning characters, let's do Joanna. Joanna is everyone's favorite Khaleesi, who has her dragons flying around her, which are the blue drakes, which increase spell power per summon in the field. So this ability is kind of garbage unless you have summons, which is immediately a negative, but it's a massive bonus if you do have the summons to support her. So chonk her down in a summon build and she's happy. But I think actually, completely ignoring the passive, she does okay in frost builds, because her cast does an AoE attack, which has a big AoE by the way, does damage to a lot of units, and applies 4 frost. So her cast is very powerful. Ideally, you can get some support with summons in your team, in your frost team. You know the bestiary that gives you a bonus summons to your summons count? That works really well there. There's a few other things like that do well, like the Crystal Seahorse or whatever it's called. So that goes well if she's in frost, and that will unleash her, unlock her damage potential. But in a summon build, that's where she excels, because you can just ignore the frost, but her AoE is massive, so she just comes down and destroys AoE fights. And then scales up her spell power. Not to mention she summons her own 2 drakes, which support the rest of your summoning heroes and relics and whatnot. Joanna's very good in summoning builds. She's pretty good in frost builds. You can make her work either way. I like that diversity. Her damage is good. Her AoE is good. She's a solid a B character. She's not A because I think I would rather these characters than her. And you can play her wrong. So if you focus too much on summoning in the frost build or vice versa, She can be a bit squishy, or she needs a bit too much investment to get going. But she's top of the day. I'm looking down here, and most of these characters are ridiculous. I've been holding out for them actually because we have a few S tiers left. Well, in my opinion, I think we've got at least a few. Let's do Eslo. So let's just keep him down here for now because we all know that Eslo never belongs in the E tier. Eslo's deal is that they have Power Shield, which gives them shielding to begin with, and then their spell damage increases with the amount of shield they have. Really good passive. If you find a way to give him shield, it does more spell damage, but if you don't, he still has a little bit of a bonus. Next up is Icy Orbs. And I would say, other than old mate Alaric, Icy Orbs is the strongest AoE attack in the entire game. It does so much damage, it travels slowly, it can hit every single enemy, it scales with Frost dramatically. So you don't need to be in a Frost build. Your tank can just the Frost armor and boom, you've unlocked the potential of this attack. Then if you find a way to give him spell power through the shielding, his attack is just turning the enemies to dust, or should I say getting frozen solid. Next up, and this is really important, he has 5 max mana. He's casting this thing so frequently. And if you give him the Jade Dagger, boom. He has 3 max mana, and he's casting this nearly twice as much. He give him the Caster Amulet, the Jade Dagger, and maybe the Staff that increases spell power but reduces attack damage, attack speed, and then he's sorted. Very easy to kill out. Has such a high potential. Comes in, needs no items, does really well. Eslo is A, and honestly, he's probably better than Zotz. I'd put him there. He's very, very good. Next up, let's do everyone's favorite frog, Zanmar. So Zanmar's deal is that his passive is double attack. Now this is an interesting one because it compounds with attack speed. If he's doing 2 attacks per second, because you've got his attack speed up to 100%, because his base is 1 attack per second. If you have 2 attacks per second, this is another 30% attack speed equivalent, because it's 15% on 2 attacks. So this is why I really like double attack, because it's not just a bonus 15% attack speed, it's 15% of the total attacks that he's doing, which is very powerful, especially because he does want to attack fast. He wants to attack fast because he's got a really cool buff. This means that all his attacks that go through that little aura scale ethereal damage based off spell power. So it increases spell power, increases attack speed, and he's sorted. Next up is an additional bonus. So similar to Eslo, in the sense that Eslo scales with Frost, Zanmar scales up with Shock. So you could give Shock Armor to your tank, he doesn't need to be in a Shock build, and then give him spell power and attack speed, and he is sorted. Which is why I said he's unusual, because it says he's hybrid here, but I've never made him an attack damage character. I've completely ignored that, because I want to focus on ethereal damage. That's where it really goes off. Because if you focus on attack speed, he's getting that added benefit from double attack, which is going to scale up his mystical arrows, and he's just going to go crazy with it. Give him some ethereal amplification items, and Zanmar is a really strong unit. The thing is though, he's dead in the water without anything. He's just not impactful enough. He's quite squishy because he's got really low health, so the green dragon loves to burst him down and take him out. To be really fully utilized, you either need ethereal amplification or you need shocks, or ideally you want both. That's a lot of requirements to make him pop off, but it's not very complex. It's kind of easy to understand that, in my opinion. I'd probably rather him than Vinrak, Alec. I'd probably rather him less than Rinji though, so we're going to put him in C tier here. And what I'm going to do is, C tier is getting quite crowded. I'm going to bump down Vinrak to the D tier because of the complexity that is required to set him up. Although I do think his upside is better than most characters. Next up, let's do another Frost character. Let's do Zoe. Zoe's deal is that her passive, which is a very cool passive, is that on cast she gets crit chance, and then after 3 of those casts, she gets omni crit, which means her spells can crit, which is good because she has base 10 crit chance. It means she's a crit character essentially. You don't need to worry about omni crit. She gets a bonus 21% from her passive, so it goes up to 31% in total, which is a very good base crit chance without any items. So her cast is interesting because it's similar to Alec. It's a cast around your allies. So she works best in a melee build because it does more damage, applies more frost. It's very similar to Alec in that regards. She herself is melee, so she's casting around herself. So as a minimum, you've got 1 unit doing that damage. But the thing about frost builds is a lot of good characters are range. Arya, James, Snowy, Eslo, Joanna. So 5 of the really poor Frost characters at range, which means Zoe's cast isn't doing much there. So you have to be careful. If you've got a lot of these characters here, Zoe becomes a lot worse. But if you've got Ava, Leuko, Ralph, maybe you've got one of these characters, but you've given them that unique item that takes away range, so they go into melee range, then Zoe becomes really busted. So she's a little complex. She wants to crit, she wants to cast frequently, and then you gotta decide if you go down the attack damage route or the spell power route. You probably want to go down the spell power route purely based on the fact that she can omni crit. And then you want mana regen to be casting more frequently. Then you also need to worry about positioning. I think even outside of all that, she's a pretty decent character. You don't need to worry about her too much, although what I said does sound like you do need to. I think she's better than Alec for sure. So she's going to sit in C tier. I'd rather her than all these characters. She probably just sits below Flynn, in my opinion, in the middling of the C tier. Let's do Nyria. Let's do a bleed character. Nyria casts an AoE spell around the enemies, and that does 4 bleed to enemies, so she enables bleed, which is cool. Just like Zoe kind of enabled Frost. And then she consumes some of her own max HP, similar to Zico, to do additional damage. So you might, and actually similar to Zico, she's got the Vamp Heart as a passive, which increases the magic steal she gets, which means she heals her life back and does more damage. Nyria is really, really strong. I like her for the exact same reasons that I like Zico. I like Zico more because I think attack damage is more powerful than spell power as a archetype in general, but I like Nyria a lot. Her mana 6 is pretty reasonably low. She starts with a 3 mana regen. She even starts with the base crit chance of 15, so she has a lot going for her. I think she requires no items to be good in Act 1, or at least until like midway Act 1, so you can plonk her down, she kind of has an impact. But her ceiling isn't as high as Zico, and so for that reason, I'm going to put her at top of the B. She is the best B character. You put her down and you feel her a lot more than you feel these C characters, for sure. In fact, she might even be better. She might even be better than Celeste, because Celeste doesn't actually do damage. She's just a supporter. But I'm a fanboy of Celeste, so I'm going to keep Nyria in B to flesh out that B category. The list is getting short, and I'm excited. Although I do have hours and hours of editing to go, it would be nice to get these all sorted. Let's go Ralph. Ralph is everyone's favorite Yeti. So Ralph has a secondary passive. He's got an initial passive, or perfect timing, which gives him attack damage every 4 seconds, which is just a brain dead. Yep, that's cool. It makes him a lot stronger every now and then, which I like. It's especially what having simple characters does. It allows you to focus on your other characters that require a bit more planning and strategy. You put Ralph down, he has an impact. But the really impressive thing about Ralph is his cast, or passive cast ability, converts his damage to spell power. So don't scale spell power on Ralph, scale attack damage, but the damage he's doing is spell damage. What that means is you want him to have magic steal if you want him to gain life from his attacks, not life steal. Secondly, his omni crit. What this means is that if you give him high crit chance, his breath can crit all the enemies, and that breath is an AoE, so he's very good in the early, lots of summons, lots of minions, lots of enemy builds. Ramping, so the ramping passive is also really good. So, wow, I forgot. Here's the 3rd passive. Wild. Every second he gains 6 attack damage, which is just nuts. That in combination with perfect timing means he's going to have such a high default attack damage without items. And then he casts his breath, which is AoE, converts to spell damage. Ralph is just nuts. Then you've got his actual cast, which removes all the ramping, which is bad. So you don't want that, because that attack damage is quite substantial, but it inflicts 3 frost. So you can either choose, do you want him to have infinite attack damage scaling, or do you want him to apply just the smallest teeny little amount of frost on the enemies? And if you can't tell by my sarcasm, you really don't want to be casting with him. It's just a downside. So give him any max mana item, and that club that increases attack damage for max mana is the perfect item on him. It's going to scale his breath, it's going to slow down his cast, and it's going to mean his AoE attack, not cast, his attack, does so much damage. Ralph is crazy. Ralph is, once you know what items to put on him, he is the easiest character in the game to play because he's tanky, he does a lot of damage, he's self-scaling, he's simple. I think Ralph belongs in S tier. I am tempted to bump him down to A purely for the fact that his late game scaling depends on getting really good items, which are few and far between for his ability, for his attacks, because he doesn't care about his cast. He just wants to attack as much as possible and get as much attack damage as possible. So he's quite a simple character, but he's the perfect beginner friendly character. Throw him in, boom, he destroys. Let's chuck Pyro in. So Pyro casts in an AoE, and self-scales based on the number of burn on their enemies with the most burn, his spell power, which is really powerful. So if you have the Flame Cloak on your tank, you're applying so many burns, or if your whole team's burns, such as having Magmis, Blake, and Ola, or whatever, you're applying so many burns, and Pyro self-scales his spell power, which is really good, because what that means, in a burn build, you can just focus on mana regen. Just give Pyro, Jade Dagger, 2 Caster's Amulet, and forget about him. Forget about him until Act 3, as long as he has the support of the burns from the rest of the team. Pyro's really good for that reason, except he is quite squishy. If you don't have burn, he's almost useless. You don't really want to be scaling him because it's such a negative to not have the burn applied because it's such a strong ability. I don't like choosing him. The one thing I do like about it, it's quite a good AoE. It does a lot of damage. It's good at clearing out the Act 1 enemies, even without the burns, but he drops off a cliff in Act 2 and 3 without the burns applied. So he is just so dependent, but his payoff is large as well. And his passive is not to be forgotten because it's extremely powerful. Every third cast, he casts his ability twice. That's twice the scaling, that's twice the damage, twice the AoE. It's really good. Pyro's quite a simple character to understand. He's simple to set up, but he's highly dependent on the burn archetype. He's staying in C, and he belongs in C. It's just, he's well balanced. He can be really good. He can be really bad. He's top of the C for me because he's just so easy. You don't need to worry about anything. He scales his spell power up faster than Azura, although Azura, they're quite similar characters, although Azura scales up with shocks instead. So like Pyro's like the burn equivalent of Azura, except Azura does become tankier. They're just a little clunkier and slower, in my experience. Next up, let's do everyone's favorite mushroom hat. Well, everyone's either first or second favorite mushroom hat, Leem. So Leems are a little complex, but not really. So their passive increases their crit every time they crit, based on the number of summons in the field. So essentially he just escalates more and more crit chance till it's 100% if you have summons. Even if you don't have summons, he's still buffing himself every now and then with crit chance, which is kind of cool. But it's really his cast, which is important here. So he's a second passive. Every time he crits, he gets a mushroom arrow stored in his quiver. Think about it that way. Then when he casts, he forges 2 more mushrooms and then shoots them all out, and they do damage based on your attack damage, and they can't crit unless you have Omni Crit. Now, these arrows are ridiculous. So any single on attack effect is broken with Flame. Like the stunning sword thing that stuns every time you attack, the fire katana, which applies burn every time he attacks. Any single one of the ethereal items that apply damage based on the number of debuffs of enemies per attack goes really well on him. There's so many items that go well on him. And when he gets plonked down, he has good base damage. The thing is, it falls off quickly unless he's itemized, and if he's not itemized well, he's pretty useless Act 2 and 3, I find. So he requires a bit of game knowledge. He comes down, has a little bit of impact, and it's pretty simple. You just want to focus him on crit chance. But where Leem goes crazy is if you can Omni Crit. So if you can somehow passive swap and give him Omni Crit, such as giving him Leuko's default passive, so you can give him critical expertise, or you give him another one, which I like, is Zoe's default passive. If you can switch them over to him somehow, then he gets Omni Crit, which means every single one of those mushrooms, which can be 5, 6, 7, whatever mushrooms, can critical strike the enemy. And if they critical strike the enemy, they can do a lot more. So here's a few items that go well with that on the screen. And it just means he's applying so many more debuffs, doing a lot more damage, self-scaling, he goes off. But because of his complexity, I think he does belong in the C tier. You can go down so many different avenues with Leem, and if you go down the wrong one, he doesn't do enough. He falls flat on his face, and your whole team's like, what are you doing? I find actually a lot of the time, I have a build, and then Leem is the weakest link. I'm like, all right, Leem, you're out of there. Even in summon builds where his passive goes off because he gets more crit chance per crit, I'd still rather pretty much any other summoning character. So I think he's well balanced. I win with him as many times as I take him out of the party, and I like him for that reason. All right, let's do Snowy. So Snowy comes down, and he rains death on the enemies. He's got 2 very strong abilities, but one with a big downside. So let's just start off with the simple one to understand, the passive, Snowy Muscle. Every thrust on the enemy increases attack damage up to 90%. That's ridiculous. So that's a very powerful self-percent scaling. So if you focus him on base attack damage, giving him the copper axe or whatever it is, he can rain death on the enemies. Interestingly, so obviously that depends on applying Frost, which he can do a little bit through Christmas Party. So Christmas Party inflicts 2 Frost on all enemies, which is nice, but then it gives him a buff for 6 seconds that gives him a ridiculous amount of crit chance and attack speed. So this is really powerful, except it has a massive downside. After he's done attacking, he stuns himself for 6 seconds. Now, there are a few items in the game which can counteract this, because every time that he stuns the enemy, it reduces that 6 second timeout by 1 second. So you can give him that grappling hook, you can give him the fire sword thing, and I think there's a few other items that you can give him. There's a mask which does stun. That means he can completely nullify that stunning ability. But the thing is, if you can't nullify that stunning, he falls off crazily quickly in the mid-Act 1, I would say. So he does require Frost and Stun, which is unusual. It's a character that depends on 2 different archetypes to make work. Fortunately, there's lots of avenues to give enemies Frost and give enemies Stun. However, I'm not picking Mr. Frost unless I've got at least Frost going or a Stun build. I think he fits into builds. He's not what you start with. Otherwise, you just don't find what you need and you're like, oh god, what have I got this dead weight in my party for? For that reason, I'm going to keep him in C. I was going to say he's a little complex and then could be pushed down to D, but I think he's just so powerful with that passive. And with the crit scaling and the attack speed buff, it's too powerful. So he's going to sit close to the bottom of C. And actually, I think Rinji's higher here. So Rinji probably sits below Azura. Frosty sits probably above Retromania. And that's the way I would put it for now. All right, let's do Count Dracula. So Count Dracula is essentially a tank that scales off of max HP. So they have a vampiric instincts. So when they get below 50% max HP, they apply 8 bleed to everyone, which is a lot of bleed. So they enable bleed to some degree. And then they automatically cast their spell, which is really cool. So it's essentially just a get out of jail free card. Boom, 50% health. Oh no, what am I going to do? I'm going to cast Batstorm. Batstorm is an AoE attack, which leeches life from enemies, but it leeches life from your heroes as well. And you might say, oh, that's such a negative, but it does have a cap. So if your heroes are below 40% health, it won't do anything to them, it will just do it to the enemies. This is quite a lot of healing. I think Savos is a really fun character. I think he's pretty simple to use because he's got vampiric instincts. So even if you don't give him no mana regen, he's got one single, reliable, powerful cast. He doesn't have taunt though. So you do need to place him carefully to make sure that enemies do attack him. I think he's got good defense, good base health. He's kind of like a pretty well-rounded character, and he's primarily in the bleed build. Obviously, it's better because he gets more leeching from the enemies. But that's kind of okay, because he's applying his own bleed as a minimum. He's a very self-sufficient character that works very well in bleed. He works in isolation as well. I've used him in a few crit builds without bleed even being there. I like Savos a lot. I think he's a pretty straightforward character. Give him the max HP armor, and he's kind of sorted. You can also go wild with it with a bit of spell power, so his cast does more healing, leeches more life, etc. I'm going to slam him in B tier, and I would rather him than... I wouldn't rather him than Naka. So those 2 tanks, which are both max HP tanks, can sit together. Right. Now we have Ola. Ola is a dual-wielding maniac who holds her 2 massive flaming swords. Honestly, one of the coolest skins in the game, in my opinion. And she's got some cool abilities. So her deal is that she scales off max mana. She's like a max mana character in a way. Her passive is Mana Dragon, and she gets more mana regen per max mana that you have. So she gets a perk for increasing her max mana. So it's her cast, which is good. So her cast increases attack damage every time she does cast it, based on your max mana. So she's got 2 perks for having more max mana, which is really cool. She also applies burn, so she's a semi-burn enabler. And this attack attacks multiple enemies at once. And I guess the final point to that is it's a hybrid cast. So it scales off attack damage and spell power. She's got so much going for her, and she's pretty brain dead in the sense that you can give her lots of max mana items. But the key here is that I find I want to give her the items she wants. She's a bit item heavy. So she wants attack damage because that's going to scale well with the cast because that's percent attack damage. So give her good base attack damage and she'll scale that. Also wants mana regen to cast this as many times as possible, which is a little bit difficult because you also want to give her max mana to utilize both of her kind of max mana synergies she has going on. I think it's like, I don't think that's very complex. I think it's pretty straightforward to understand. I think she's a really good character. Give her a bit of mana regen, give her a bit of attack damage, and she's sorted. She has a pretty good impact on the board. She works well inside of crit builds, I find. She works well inside of burn builds, and she has an impact on the board. If she's not invested in, she falls off quickly. I think Ola is probably high C. really high C because she can fall off without any investment and she sits well in her synergies. It's a perfect C, like she's a perfect C character. All right. Now, next up, let's do Rune. Rune Seal is they're a tank, they're a shock tank, and they're kind of like the inverse of Orion in the sense that their passive gives them shield over time. Every 6 seconds they get a shield based on their max HP, and then the hero heals 4% of their max HP. So he's got inherent healing and shielding from his passive, which is very powerful. It's such a really good added layer of defense. And then when he casts, he does damage based on max HP, applies shock, and then heals for the amount of damage dealt. So Rune is just a more robust tank than Orion, because he's got 2 layers of defensive kind of abilities going on. I really like Rune. I don't have much to say about him. He works well in shock builds, he works well in max HP builds, he works well in shielding builds, and I actually like shock characters in Frost builds, because Frost, any spell damage, which is what Frost specializes in, can trigger the stunning from shocks. So typically shock and frost go well together, just like bleed and burn go well together. One's melee, one's magic. So Rune's pretty like straightforward. You put him down, you give him some max HP, a bit of defense, and he's sorted. He's very simple to make. He's got a lot of synergies that can work with different items based on max HP that I've shown you before, such as items on Naka or Silas. Except he does kind of feed into the shock synergies, the stun synergies, the max HP synergies. I like him. He's straightforward, he's good, he's definitely better than C. I think he's stronger than all the tanks I've done in C so far, better than Orion because he's a bit less squishy, a bit more straightforward, and comes down and you feel his impact as a tank. He really does feel like a tank. I'm going to put him here, above these two. Honestly, I'll put him above Magmis. I think he just edges Magmis out. We're getting short on the list, guys. So how many are we down to? 9 characters, yikes. Let's do Zephyrs. We'll do the other Chonko tank. They look quite similar, Zephyrs and Rune. So, Zephyrs' deal. So, Zephyrs is the tokenistic crit strike and summon tank. So, every time he crits, he summons a water elemental up to 3. So, first of all, the summon alarm bell is going off saying, oh wow, he works well in summon builds. Next up, his base crit is 30%. He works well in crit builds. That's another brownie point. Second of all, he's got Leech Life. This is pretty minimalistic. I've never made this really go off, but I don't typically focus on spell power on him. That's probably why. So it just means that you leech life from your crystal, your water elementals. So he's got a bit of inherent survivability. So he's got crit, summon, survivability, and he is a tank. He fits into a lot of builds. He turns on. He's the primary character I like to choose if I'm choosing summon build, because he is the tank. I prefer him over Layla nearly every day of the week, even though I ranked Layla highly. I think Zephyrs is my favorite tank. I like the diversity because he keeps you open to 2 of the strongest builds in the game. He also heals himself just a little bit, and he can be kitted out in many different ways because he can hit like a truck. With 30% crit chance, he can do a lot of attack damage, and so you can get a lot of life regen from lifesteal. I love Zephyrs. He also comes with 40 base defense, which is pretty good. It's 5 higher than Layla and a lot of other characters. So yeah, Zephyrs is pretty slam dunk for me. I'd say he's pretty beginner friendly because you can put him down. He summons his own elementals based off his crit chance. You can kind of not fail kitting him out as long as you give him a bit of survivability through health or defense. He does well. He's definitely gonna go in A tier for me. I think he just has such a high upside to unlock all those synergies, and all you need to do is essentially not fail kitting him out. I probably would put him above Ava because Ava relies on Frost, but Mr. Zephyrs, he brings the summons, he brings the crit, so he unlocks strategies, a strong tank, does some damage. I love him. So he can go up here, probably above Zotz, but behind Eslo. That feels kind of good to me. And I might actually shuffle Ava to the bottom of A because her dependency on Frost is such a critical and fundamental dependency. Without it, she doesn't do much. Ooh, we're getting down to some strong characters. I've not left many of... Like, these are characters I use all the time, and I really like them. Let's do James. James is one I'm kind of on the fence about. I always flip-flop with him. So, James's deal is he's a Frost character, and every 3 attacks, he lands a Frost on the enemy, and every crit he does, he lands a Frost as well. So he can apply a lot of Frost, assuming you're critting and attacking quickly. So he's got a good high base crit chance of 20%, but when he casts, he gives himself a self buff. This buff increases his crit chance and heals the team for damage dealt. So he's quite a cool character in the sense that he's an attack damaging character in a Frost build, which doesn't pair up too well, in my opinion. So, you know, you can do James, Leuko, Snowy in the crit chance, and maybe even Zoe and Ralph. Those guys work well together. But he doesn't work so well with maybe Ava, maybe Joanna, and Ezlo if you're going down the spell power route. The thing about James is I find he's quite thirsty, right? So he wants a bit of spell power to increase his self buff. He wants a bit of mana to make sure the buff is going off more frequently enough to have an effect on his attacks. He wants attack damage because he's an attack damage character. He wants attack speed so he gets more frosts off, and you need to make sure his crit chance is capped, so you will probably want a bit of crit damage as well to capitalize on that. He wants a lot of things, and he does a lot of things. He's on the more complex side to get him right. So I think I'm probably going to keep him in low C tier for me, because he can be played wrong, he can be played right, just like every other character. I put it in C, I say the same thing. I'd rather play him below Finn, so he probably sits in the lower third, middle third of C tier. Next up, let's do the lizard on two legs, Solarath. Solarath's passive heals for every ethereal damage he does, and that's good because he does a lot of ethereal damage through his cast. So his cast does instant ethereal attacks based on max mana. So if you have 10 max mana, he does 10 attacks. It applies ethereal damage and on attack effects, but doesn't do attack damage. So with Solarath, he's on the more complex side of characters, especially for beginners, except his upside can be astronomical. There are so many sick items that go with him. So first of all, you don't care about max mana because more max mana means more attacks. I like to use the mana regen 1 thing that increases max mana. So the increasing max mana means he's going to do more infinite strikes, but the increase in mana regen means he's going to do even more infinite strikes. So it's like self-synergistic in that regard. And the cool thing about these infinite strikes is they apply on attack effects and ethereal damage. So there's lots of items that go really well with him, such as any item that stuns on attack, any item that applies a debuff on attack, any item that scales or deals ethereal damage on attack. There are lots of cool things. But because of the interaction of not doing attack damage and only ethereal damage, he's on the more complex side of characters. Honestly, Solarath has been in some of my more game-breaking runs. He can actually, if you make him correct and he gets the correct support from the rest of the team, his damage can just be through the roof. But more times than not, he flops because you're trying to work on your whole team at once, and he requires a lot of attention to get right. Sometimes you just get lucky. Sometimes you go shop, relic, and then item, and it's all perfectly suited for him, and he's a powerful character. But on his own, he's not good. He does need the item support. Fortunately, I don't think he requires synergistic support. He doesn't really require much from anyone else. He just requires items and maybe a relic or two to get going. I really like Solarath. I would love to put them high personally, S tier, but I think due to the complexity of his attacks and I guess not beginner nature friendly, I'm actually going to put him in the D tier below Leuko. Again, this one hurts. To me, he's S. To me, he's S based on my experience and the things I like to do with him. But I feel like for a new player, you probably want to shy away from him. Okay, it's a brand new day, at least in my world, and it's time to get a bit more serious because we're down to our last 6 characters, and boy, are some of them strong. I am going to put my patented YouTube headband on that I wear for my other videos. Just like Naruto would when things get serious. Go to the Leaf Village. I've also gone to Kmart and bought myself a bit of a light because I realized it was getting a bit dark in some of those videos. I don't know, does America have Kmart? I actually don't know what America's equivalent of Kmart would be if you don't have it. Anyway, probably Target. All right, let's crack on in to Chris. So, Chris's deal is every time he heals someone, he gets a nature orb, and then on cast, he shoots out his nature orbs that deal a combination of ethereal and spell damage. Very, very powerful damage. You don't need many items to get some like lethal damage off in the first act. Then his passive is Magic Potion. Magic Potion just heals based on his spell power. So Chris is a really good candidate for beefing up his spell power as much as possible. One combination I like to do on him, and essentially any caster, this goes for anyone that I've said so far and anyone I'm going to say, actually not relevant for these 5, but relevant for any caster I have talked about. Use the power stuff that reduces attack speed, then use that magical dagger thing that increases spell power over time, but reduces spell power if you attack. So what you want to do in those builds is reduce their attack speed as much as possible, but then over time it will scale their spell power, which is really powerful because it's essentially, the longer you keep them alive, the more damage they're doing. But for someone like Chris, it's not just the longer you keep them alive, the more damage they're doing, it's the more they're healing. which means the more orbs they're generating, which means more ethereal and spell damage. And the beauty of Chris is he's ethereal, so you can scale his damage off ethereal amplification. He's also spell damage, so you can scale it that way. Chris is a really strong character. He requires little setup. He just throws some spell power and some mana regen on him, and he is a-okay. If you find an item so he heals more, so he gets more nature orbs, even better. Chris is a very strong character. Honestly, no weaknesses. He's just well-rounded, does a lot of damage. His cast time is 8 mana, so it's like a little bit slow, but that's okay because he's doing things in between. He's healing your team up. I really like Chris. I don't have too much more to say on him. He's just powerful. Do that minus attack speed combination with him. He's one of the better characters to do that with. I also like to do that on old Tree Boy here. Essentially any caster. That goes well with Azura. Whoops. That goes well with both the healer and the shielder. Anyone that is a pure spellcaster and never wants to attack. So Chris is a slam A. He is probably, I'd say, just below Ezlo, I reckon, in terms of his fireability. He's higher than the tank because he does heal your team, and it's not a small mana heal either. So he's very strong. He's not S tier because he just doesn't have that impact. He doesn't have AoE. His heal's good, but not great. He does require some items to really get going. His presence is felt for sure, and that's why he's in A, but I probably would rather these 3 above him. But Chris is a really, really, really good spellcaster for a beginner. So yeah, cool. Now let's crack on into XC. XC is a tank. When they cast, they give themselves a buff that increases their attack speed and gives them a bit of life regen. Now, I'm hoping I can keep talking until I find him on the screen. He's the very first one. So yeah, he generates a buff called Super Mode that gives him attack speed and lifesteal and taunts the enemy. So this is really cool. So when he casts, he attacks ferociously. So he works really well with anything that's on attack effect. And it means you can actually scale him to do a lot of attack damage. And he has a high base attack damage. He's got 70 over here. So he's doing quite a bit of damage for a tank, which means he's actually dependent on casting this buff to stay alive, because that lifesteal is what's giving him the juice to stay alive. He's also got 50 base defense, which is on the high side of all characters, I think, except his health is quite low. So you want to invest a bit of health in him. You want to invest just enough mana to get the buff up continuously, but not so much it's kind of interrupting his attacks with the buff. And then he's got a pretty cool passive, which is Overheat Shield. Overheat Shield just literally gives him shield when he gets to 50 max HP, so that's pretty cool as well. I've made it ways, and some of the better ways I've done it, he's been a hybrid lifesteal character. So it goes well with that sword that gives him attack damage and spell power, and lifesteal and magic steal based on how much health he has left. It's like an orange item. He also works well with the Surge hybrid weapon. I just like to make him an offensive tank, and I give him a bit of survivability. For example, if you had Chris could heal him up as he's doing his kind of rapid attack. I like XE. I think, though, he's not easy to get. So if you don't invest his items and his recipes right, he'll just die, because he is your tank. He's in the thick of it. So you got to make sure you're balancing the defense with the offense, and then you got to understand his buff and how frequently that's casting off. I think he's on the less beginner-friendly side, and I think as a beginner, he's probably on the lower end, and I would choose him somewhere probably around where Zoe is. That's the same energy he gives off to me, at least. Okay, so this has not been intentional. I've not left the last 4 characters to all be crit characters. They're just really strong, and I'm going to struggle to not put some in S tier, for example. So let's do Cairo. Cairo is a very interesting character. So we got a Cairo here. Cairo has a lot going on for them, and fortunately or unfortunately, I guess there has to be a character that has a broken combination. I think Cairo's the strongest character in the game. I think he's the strongest character in the game because of one combination of items, and I'll explain that just after I explain his passive and his spell cast. So first of all, Cairo does ethereal damage and hybrid, who also scales bleed. So he is a package. And you might think, oh, that's so complicated. Yes, that's true. But the thing is, his upside is so strong, I don't care how complicated he is. If you make it work, he will carry. And when I say carry, I mean he can solo hard mode by himself with the right item setup. So, first of all, let's talk about his passive, Bloody Intervention. Every 4 seconds he does ethereal damage to the enemies based on his attack damage and applies some bleed. The bleed is nice. The bleed gets things going off like that hat that gives mana. I'll put it on the screen now. But more importantly, the ethereal damage based off attack damage. So this is cool. because Magic Steel works with ethereal damage, Ethereal Amplification works ethereal damage, and so if you just invest attack damage into him, he's hitting like a truck and applying ethereal damage. So boom, that's really powerful as it stands. But then he's got to cast. He's first of all 6 max mana. He's casting frequently. But when he casts, he does an AO attack, which is great for Act 1, that scales up with the number of bleeds, which he's applying through Bloody Intervention. So he's helping himself out here, scratching his own back. Then the cast is based off attack damage again. So it's ethereal damage based off attack damage. So if he's casting a lot, he's doing a lot of damage. And ethereal damage is you're already getting bonus of ethereal damage from Bloody Intervention. So he's a very ethereal based character. And you can kind of ignore spell damage, because he does ethereal damage based off your attack damage. So ignore spell damage on him. He does want to cast a lot though, because this cast is quite powerful with that ethereal kind of hit. Honestly, that combination of things right there would put him in high A. But the reason he's high S is because of the item combination I talked about with Zico. And it works well on Zico, it works well on Nox, it works well on characters that cast quickly. But on Cairo, it's just unbelievably broken. So step 1, you want the Copper Axe. You want to reduce his attack speed, which, if you think about it, is not a negative. Well, much of a negative, because he's doing attack damage through Bloody Intervention. He's doing attack damage through Sanguine Rupture. So you just pretend he never attacks again. That's the mindset you should have with Cairo. You never want him to attack, you want him to do damage other ways. So that's step 1, is Copper Axe. Ideally, 2 green Copper Axes. Next up, 1 green Caster Amulet. That will mean he has some mana regen to cast more frequently, which is doing your attack damage as ethereal damage. So boom. There's a sick combo. He's already that alone, without any recipes attached to those items, is going to destroy the enemies. Next up is the items. Now, there are so many sick things that go well with that combination of items. One, there's that flailing mace kind of looking thing that increases your attack damage by 45 or 65%, or even higher if it's purple, but reduces your attack speed. Again, we don't care if he's attacking because he's doing his damage through ethereal damage. That's a really good item. Next one is, and this is a very common theme, is Telekinesis Glove. I definitely think Telekinesis Glove needs a nerf that does ethereal damage based on mana regen. So first of all, you have the Caster Amulet, which gives him mana regen. He has 1 base mana regen, so he's already up to 6 there. And then if you give him the glove, I think that gives him another 3, which puts him up to 9 mana regen, which is about 1 proc a second of the Telekinesis Glove. So he's doing ethereal damage in 3 different ways if you get the Telekinesis Glove on him, and he has massive attack damage because of the Copper Axe. Next up, you can put the Timeless Amulet, which scales his attack damage as a percent from memory, based on negative attack speed. And if you've got that flailing mace on him and all these negative attack speed items, that is going to blow his attack damage through the moon. And the best part about that is the spell power he gets from it isn't wasted. It's gonna mean Sanguine Rupture does even more damage. It's just a ridiculous combination of items, and there are so many different items that work well with him that I should be showing on screen now that I don't come to mind. But I think I've captured the point of how powerful Cairo is. Now, that combination of items works well on any single character in the game. You can give that combination of items to a spellcaster like Joanna, and it will be really powerful, especially with a caster who gets spell power from the Timeless Amulet. But on Cairo, who has 2 abilities that pair up nicely already with that combination, he melts enemies. When I say he melts enemies, I mean he is doing 100 times more damage than my next damage dealer. It is insane. As soon as I get that combination, I know I've won the run. So Cairo honestly doesn't have a downside, especially if you can get some Magic Steel on him. Like when you level him up to level 3, always click Magic Steel, because that's going to mean he heals his life back from all this ethereal damage instantly. Alternatively, it's really ideal to give your characters defense or health so that they don't get one-tapped by those dragons at the end of Act 3. You know, the ones that go, and then they just kill your guy. So, Cairo is top of the S tier. It's not, interestingly, it's not because he's so big and friendly, because there's lots to think, like, I guess there's lots of ways to think about him. But if you actually just don't think and go, herder, give him attack damage, he'll do well. He does the most damage in the game, the easiest, and he's just like a strict upgrade to old chicken nugget boy here. So that's Cairo, and I wanted to do him first. When I discovered that combination of items, I was blown away, and yeah, so give it a go. And I'm sure there's many other combination of items that do that in the game. This one's just so consistent. You just get to an orange relic, and the best part is you don't need the telekinesis glove and the timeless amulet. You can just use one or the other, and he's strong enough to win the game. So that then you're not rolling forever, because as soon as you see that either one of those two things, you click it. Another item that goes well with anyone who's attack damage focused is that hammer that shares that attack damage to one individual. The team's bonus attack damage to one individual. That's very powerful, especially if you're scaling attack damage on Kara. Okay, next up, let's do Nox. So Nox is a tiny little bleed character, and he's very, straight off that, he's very strong. So he's got tiny health, and he's got less than the minimum max mana. So he's casting very frequently. So a good way to think about Nox is that his cast is actually his attack because he's casting it so frequently. So get him a bit of mana, and he'll never attack again, and he'll just be cast. So his cast, Execute, is based off physical damage, and it's a guaranteed crit, which is cool. So it works well with crit synergies. That's interesting for his passive, and I'll get to that in a second. When he executes, he applies one bleed, and that's good for any bleed synergies, such as, Cairo or Silas or whatever. And this also scales up the attack speed, which is good, so it doesn't delay if you're casting it very frequently. You can actually get it off very rapidly. I also love the animation for this. He becomes really big, and he just swipes at the enemy. Tough little boy. So then we got Hemorrhage. Hemorrhage is, in my opinion, the strong part of Nox. So if you can scale Bleed through the Bleed armor or through any one of these characters that apply lots of Bleed, he gets critical strike damage up to 30 times. That's 300% crit damage, and he's guaranteeing crit chance through his cast. So Nox does extreme amounts of damage if you can apply Bleed, and he applies his own Bleed, so he's self-sufficient to a degree that way. I really like Nox. He's very easy to kill out, similar to Old Mate Seiko, similar to Cairo. I like to throw some attack damage items on him, but I do like him to have attack speed because of the crit synergies he's got going on here. So I don't like minus attack things. I like the Great Axe on him and the Book of Mana to increase that attack speed, but give him a bit of attack damage as well. Nox can be really broken just with bleed applied, and that's it. Not much more to say. You do want some survivability on him because, first of all, he's tiny and squishy and has no lifesteal. So you gotta get something. You gotta get a bit of defense. You gotta get a bit of health. You gotta get some healing. You have to have something, otherwise he falls. That's one critical weakness. And the next one is that he's a little bit self-sufficient with the bleed, but he needs to be more to really capitalize on hemorrhage because he needs 30 bleeds. So there's two negatives there which bring him out of the S tier because he is very strong. So Nox is definitely A, and he's high in A to me. I would prefer him less than Chris. I'd actually prefer him more than Zotz, but less than Zephyrus. So Nox, welcome to the A team. And A team's getting quite heavy because we're not done yet. So let's go to Marco. Marco is one of my current favorite characters. He's recently had a nerf, to my knowledge, but Marco's deal is another crit character. And if we go to him, so he's a shielding crit character, which is why I like him. Also bleed. Let's start with his passive. His passive, Lone Wolf, increases his crit chance based on the distance he's from the allies. So if you position him well, his crit chance can be beefed up quite high. It's a little clunky, and at times I find it's difficult to place him well without getting aggro, and you don't want aggro on your damage. So I kind of most of the time disregard this, except for the second part of it, which is when he crits, he applies bleed to everyone. So if you get his crit chance up, he's just applying bleed, and you don't need to worry about Lone Wolf, like the first part of the ability. Next, and this is one of the best casts in the game, in my opinion. So he shoots Bleeding Storm, he shoots arrows into the sky, and he gains shield equal to the damage dealt times the number of bleed on his enemy. So if the enemy has a lot of bleed and he does a lot of damage, he gets a lot of shield, which you might think, oh, what shield on a damager? That's not great. Well, look at the second part of that cast. He gets attack damage equal to 10% of his shield. So if he's got max shield, every single time he's doing that attack, he's getting hundreds of attack damage, which is insane. Very strong. He's also hybrid, so you can give him a bit of spell damage, but I tend to just focus on attack damage with him. And yeah, he's a beast. And the reason I like him so much is because he does so much damage. He's self-scaling through these two things here. He's a one-man army, and he is easy to make the biggest damage dealer. I like to throw the dagger on him that increases attack damage based on shield. The book, which increases mana regen based on how much shield he has. And then for the third item, I like to give him one of the orange items that share or produce shield. There are 3 that come to mind. First of all, there's the helmet that gives him shield based on the shield on anyone else, which is cool to cap out his shield, which maximizes his damage. There's the Sierra, which shares the shield he receives from his attack damage, his cast, to the rest of the team, so he can kind of be a utility that way. But my favorite item on him is that I think it looks like a shield. Essentially, yeah, it's a shield with like a dragon on it or something. Every time he attacks, every time he crits, he shares out attack damage to the team if they have shield. So if you find a way to give your team shield from one of the many relics that are available, or from, you know, Naomi or whatever, then he gives the entire team attack damage, and that can be very powerful, can scale quite quickly. And so Kitty's just stepped on the printer. So Marco has a lot of utility, he has a lot of flexibility, he has a lot of base damage, he has a lot of survivability because of the shield. He is an all-in-one package. I don't actually think he has a weakness. He is going to be, where are you, mate? Bottom of the S. I think Marco is just too easy. He's the example of the character I said in my tier list definition. He is just every characteristic of a B. He's got pretty good damage. He's got pretty good survivability. He's got pretty good utility. He turns bleed on. He has good shield utility as well. He's just got everything going for him without a single weakness. He is a great unit. He gives himself attack damage. You don't need to worry about spell damage. Oh, and items that go well on him, like base items, not recipes. I really like crit chance items to get him critting more frequently, so that he applies more bleed and scales his shield faster, which is scaling his attack damage faster. I also like a few books of mana, just because you want him to be casting as frequently as possible. Cast, to get that attack damage and share it out with the team if you can. And there's also the Gladius. The Gladius works well on him, so if you give him the Gladius, he's going to give attack damage to the rest of the team that has shield. So there's so many cool shield items that work with Marco. Marco is bottom of the S. He could be tippy top of the A, because he's not like a superstar, but he kind of is in the sense that he has nothing wrong with him. So Marco, in you get, and yeah, he was one of the first characters I thought were kind of broken when I played, but then he got nerfed, and he's just really, really good around the board. And then, woo! I can't believe I've done it, guys. It's been days of recording, even more days of editing. We're down to lucky last Shrop. So he's got a secondary passive in Bleeding Razor, which means every time he crits twice, his mana gets filled, which is cool, because first of all, if you focus on crit chance, you don't need to worry about mana regen. Or you don't even need to worry about max mana either. So items like this and this, the club and the axe, go really well on him. So he's a little demanding in the sense that you want attack damage, you want attack speed and crit chance, but that's kind of it. And there's some amazingly busted recipes that go with him, and I'll get to that in just a second. So his damage is increased per bleed on the enemy, and it's cool because his passive is Lacerate, which applies bleed based on max mana, and you are scaling up his max mana through those items I just mentioned. So he's kind of an all-in-one package, except he does need crit chance. Shrop, I've mentioned before. Gerald gives out crit chance based on his ability here. Shrop and Gerald are a really good first pick. If you see them together, that's going to be quite powerful. I like those two as an initial pairing. Otherwise, you need to give him items, get a relic. There's lots of ways to give characters crit. But yeah, that's what I like for Shrop. So Shrop comes in, he does amazing damage. He does have one critical weakness, this is single target damage. If you have too many single target characters, you'll get blown away by the AoE fights. So if you have, for example, if you start the game, you have Naka, you have Shrop, maybe you've got Liam, Karina, and Gerald. Yeah, you've got a really good crit team, but you've got no one doing AoE damage, and you will get taken out. That is a fundamental flaw in all crit builds. So make sure you're thinking about your AoE with a crit build specifically, because AoE comes so naturally with Frost builds, Burn builds, and all the other builds. It's kind of like their key characters have AoE, but not in the crit build. Anyway, off topic. Back on topic. Shrop, you're incredible, mate. You do extreme amounts of damage, and there's one item that just explodes his damage. It's the bone dagger looking thing, which increases attack damage based on max mana, and every time he casts, he increases his max mana. I think that's how it goes. Essentially, every time he crits twice, he's going to cast, which is going to increase his max mana, which increases his attack, and you don't care that it increases max mana. That's actually a benefit for Lacerate and for the bone dagger thing itself. So he goes crazy with that item. Would highly recommend it. You get it if you can. You got to be careful you don't go too hard in attack without getting too much crit, or too hard in crit chance without getting attack damage. So he needs to be itemized well, but it's not that difficult, and his damage is crazy. His damage can just shoot through the moon, kind of like Karo. He's actually a competitor with Karo in terms of damage. slightly less because of all the ethereal amplification bonuses you can get on Cairo. But yeah, Shrop is amazing. So Shrop is, I'm arguing with myself, is he top of the A or, you know, somewhere in the S tier? His weakness is AoE, and you must be playing him in a crit build. I don't find he works too well in isolation because he does need crit chance, and I like to focus him on attack damage to get his attack through the roof. So I'm tempted to go one or the other. I'm actually going to go bottom of the S. And the reason I'm going to do that is because he's one of the first characters I learned a cool item combination on. He's the first one I'm like, oh, if I use this and this, he's going to do a lot of damage. And I did it, and it worked well, and he destroyed all the enemies. So welcome to the S tier. And this is the first snapshot of what the tier list is going to look like. I am now going to reshuffle based on relativity. So there's a few characters I've had in my mind since the start of this that I'm thinking, I probably want to change them around. I don't think this is right. And so beginning with Nyria. Nyria is better than I thought, because I mentioned how Nyria scales well with attack, max HP builds. She also scales well with defense builds because she has that defense generation. So you can use that Dark Seed or whatever it's called, the shield that does ethereal damage based on defense. That goes really well in Nyria because of that defense scaling. She works really well in Surge builds. She actually works well outside of Surge builds because you do generate Surge over time. It's not hard to find an item that generates Surge. There are so many of them. So I like Nyria more than I was giving her credit for. I'm bumping her into the B tier. I would recommend her as a beginner-friendly tank, and I'm actually bumping her up highly. I think, honestly, she gives Atreos a run for their money. I'm going to bump 9 lower in the B tier because he does require the hybrid synergies and Surge to really get going, which is just on the more complex side. I would rather I think he's just above Blake here. Ava ceiling is S+ in my opinion. Her damage can literally rival Cairo at his peak if you get the defense, cast speed, spell damage, and frost on the enemy. But I just said a lot of things. And that can be quite complex to get going, and it might not be possible without the right team support. Too many drawbacks. She's a good tank. She is getting bumped down into B. Next up is Rinji. I'm not going to change his position, but I said something incorrectly before. I said that you shouldn't focus on mana regen. I think it's completely viable to focus on mana regen if you've got more than one debuff going on an enemy. So if you have Shock and Frost, then put some mana regen in Rinji, and he's gonna add out 8 every time he casts, which is cool. I just think 4 per cast isn't enough, because that's the equivalent of like Magmis, you know, but Magmis has damage, AoE, etc. So as long as you've got 2 different debuffs on the enemy, but you can focus on mana regen for Rinji. So that's one correction I'd like to make. And one thing I did want to mention is some people might think Cora and Elriel are similar in terms of their healing capability, because, you know, they damage and they heal based on a circle, right? That's not correct, because Elriel focuses on the most damage. So if you have 3 enemies in a triangle, and the circle goes around those 3 enemies, there's not much circle outside the enemies, which is typically where your allies are sitting, so the healing is not getting them at all. But Cora, she doesn't focus her damage in the center of the enemy, she focuses it on the center of herself. So typically, she's sitting with your melee characters and healing them drastically. So I think Cora is substantially better as a healer than Elriel, but I could definitely see how someone would think they're very similar abilities. They're not, in my opinion. They have Cora has a much higher upside in terms of healing, which is why I consider her a much better healer than Elriel. And I really do think Cora should be beefed up as well. I think Cora is top of the C tier. I really like her. Just throw those spell damage items down, and she is going wild with it. I've been deliberating this S tier. There is one that sticks out to me that needs a little more thought, and is strong in Act 1, but not a carry in Act 1 necessarily, and that's Emmy. So Emily does a little bit less damage than Elora. They can carry in Act 1, but they fall off without the correct items, and the items do need to be synergistic. You need to get specific things like that trumpet or the crystal mace that I mentioned when we talked about her earlier. I think she's a very strong character. I think Emmy is getting bumped down to top of the A. She defines A, and you know what? That feels good to me. I was just thinking to myself, you're at the start of the game. You've got the character selection on. You see Marco. How do you feel? I feel good. You see Ralph. You're like, yep, slam him. You see Elora. Oh, yes, please. I see Shrub, and I feel that, but with a slight, what if I don't get the items? Because without the items, he doesn't do much, and he isn't AoE, and AoE is so important in Act 1. I think for that reason, he's top of the A. And I'm sorry to demote you, Shrop, but you're not quite as powerful as these for beginners. These are my 5 that I would select to help you win. There's one demotion to B tier, and then there's one promotion to B tier. So starting off the demotion, it's Celeste. Celeste, I was just thinking about it. She's worse than Gerald in the sense that she does strip away mana regen, just like Gerald strips away crit chance. The thing is, she requires items to do that. And even when you do that, she doesn't have much impact on the board until you get some cool itemization. So she's going to get demoted into B tier. And honestly, these tanks are... I'd probably rather her than these two, but below Magmis. So she's middle of the B tier. Pretty big demotion if you think about it that way. Then promotions. Arya. Arya she's just an easy character to use. She comes in, she stuns, she applies bleed, she can do some damage, she's got some good attack speed, she requires very little thought, and she has a higher impact. Much higher than Blake, for example. So Arya, you're getting promoted, and I would rather you... I think you're just below 9. I think you just sneak in. Yeah, I've looked at her up and down, and I am pretty happy with where we're at here. And I probably should have opened up with this, but this game is incredible. If you have not played this game, get on it, guys. It's the best single-player, team-based tactical game that I've played, Auto Battler, that is. And it's one of my top 5 games of all time. I've played this for hundreds of hours, and I got hundreds more in me, at least, if not thousands. There's so many different interactions between every hero, every relic, every item, every recipe. There's just so much going on, and the complexity is so layered that you can never play the same build twice. There's always something new to learn with these characters. Even after my 230 hours, I still have characters in E. That goes to show you how much depth there is to the game. I'd recommend joining the Discord. So the developer of the game themselves is very active in there, Hotloops. Hotloops, thank you so much. You answer my questions. You have made one of my favorite games. This is incredible. I'm not going to stop playing. Please don't stop working on it. I love it so much. The little tweaks you're doing are so incredible, and they reignite the flame of excitement as well. So thank you for the game. You're incredible. Thumbs up from me. So this is my tier list, and if you want more content from The Last Flame, come join my channel and watch my videos. I've got like 30 videos already out about this game where I've been learning the game as I go. I'm now in a position where I know it pretty well, and I'm just trying to come up with cool strategies, defeat the game with every reborn of each character. When I do that, there will be another tier list out, a reborn version of this exact tier list, only focusing on reborn versions of the characters, which will be awesome when I get around to that. This video has taken me days and days of recording and many more days of editing. There's been so many takes, audio tweaks, things thrown in, because I want to make this as informative for new players as possible, but I also want to be entertaining. I want you guys to enjoy my content, because that's why I'm doing it. I want to get people into the game, and I want to, I guess, bring a smile on people's face. So if you like the video, please consider liking and subscribing, and hopefully I'll see you guys around. Cheers. Thanks for watching. Bye.